p.m. every day, they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed Whack the Rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine a Scouse to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour Ghost Train.
Yeah.
We're
across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell with you between now and 1 o'clock. Loads to talk about this morning. The trans ruling this week. Women are women and men are men. It's as simple as that. Well, the trans lobby, guess what? They had a huge protest in central London yesterday. Someone, as part of their number, defaced the Millicent Fawcett statue, who is a real hero of the suffragist movement, of course. Winston Churchill's statue was adorned with a trans flag. Why can't they just get that through their heads that the law is the law, the rule of law is so important? And, of course, the conflation of the Palestinian movement with the trans movement. Try going to Gaza as a trans man or trans woman. See how you get on. I wouldn't recommend it, I must say. We'll be talking about that. We'll be getting your views on that. We'll be speaking to Miranda Yardley, who's a trans woman, about that in just a second. We'll have Phil Dave and Paul Richards on the debate desk. Lots to discuss, including the very sad news that there is a Just Stop Oil activist in prison, and apparently she can't get access to a vegan stir fry. I know my thoughts and prayers are there with them. Let me tell you, on a much more serious note, Ukraine and Russia, what is going on there? Certainly there seems to be a we're told by Vladimir Putin that there is a 30-hour ceasefire. I don't believe him. Do you? We'll get the latest from Mary Dejevsky and Philip Ingram on that. We'll check in on the Easter travel chaos as well. And lorry drivers, maybe you're an HGV driver. I know there are a lot of HGV drivers and HGV families who watch and listen to this programme. I've spoken to loads of HGV drivers over the years. And there's a really, really interesting charity in Northern Ireland called Breaker. Breaker has started to raise awareness of the mental health of drivers in the haulage industry because, look, spending a lot of time on your own out there on the road, it can be very, very lonely. I'd love to hear from some HGV drivers. Please let me know your thoughts on this. Or maybe you think, actually, you're fine and this doesn't need to happen. 0344 499 1000. We'll speak about Pothole Britain as well, and the welfare challenges to bunnies. It's Easter today, and a very happy Easter to you. And rabbits are apparently a really, really neglected species. We need to talk about that a little bit later on. You know me, animal welfare is something that really matters to me, as do adopting animals rather than shopping for them. Loads to discuss. Let me know your thoughts on any of these very varying topics. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute, please. We'll play out as many of those as we can between now and 1 o'clock. And of course, you can give me a ring on that number as well. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 1 here on Talk. Well, lots happening in London yesterday. Of course, as we always remember, this station is not about London, but London is, of course, the capital of our country. 82% of our viewers and listeners live outside London. If you forget that, well, then you're not a good presenter in this programme, let me tell you. What is really important is that this week, the Supreme Court, after about 15 years plus of wrangling about this, really decided really straightforwardly that biological sex, so straightforward, a man's a man, a woman's a woman, and that's it, your biological sex, which Professor Sir Robert Winston, who is of course one of the most eminent geneticists, remember that brilliant programme he did on the BBC years ago, The Human Body, he says that biological sex is actually part of every single cell in your body. Anyway, the Supreme Court said, essentially, straightforwardly, a man is a man and a woman is a woman. In a shock move that, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the trans rights lobby not happy about this at all, and they have had a big protest in central London yesterday. They defaced a statue of Millicent Fawcett, who's a real hero, of course, of the suffragist movement, and at one stage they conflated the trans rights sort of activism with the Palestinian cause. Yes, really, we're through the looking glass here. It just doesn't make any sense. So let's just have a little look at what some of these trans rights activists were chanting yesterday about not just trans rights, but also the Palestinian cause. Honestly, it's mad.
One struggle, one fight, Palestine trans rights. 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 One struggle, one fight, Palestine trans rights.
So that's obviously nonsense, and I looked up what are rights for trans people in the Palestinian territories, and specifically in Gaza, because they're putting these two together. They're saying it's one struggle and one fight. Well, there's no gender affirming care, there is no recognition of non-binary gender, there are no protections against discrimination, there are no protections against employment discrimination, there are no protections against housing discrimination against trans people. You can't adopt, you can't join the military, you can't, well, maybe Hamas would have you, I don't know, I would imagine they wouldn't. You can't donate blood, for example, and conversion therapy is banned. And in terms of public opinion, do you think Gaza is a good place for gay and lesbian people, not even trans people, gay and lesbian people? 4% said that was a good thing. Acceptance of homosexuality in Arab countries, this is in 2019. 5% acceptance, 95% of people don't accept gay relationships. Justifiability of homosexuality, 0.5% against 87.4%. Acceptance of a gay person as your neighbour, 34.5%. Saying no, don't want the gay people to be your neighbours, 65% in Arab countries. Should society accept homosexuality in the Palestinian territories? A survey in 2013, that's the latest time for which a survey is available. 4% of people said yes. I wonder if any trans people or people supporting trans rights went to Gaza, how they would get on. I imagine it wouldn't go particularly well for them, because Hamas are against Western rights. They're against gay rights, they're against trans rights, they're against women's rights, they're against people being free, they're against hostages being free, and if they give back the 59 hostages that they're holding, well then the war would end. That's what would happen. In regard to trans rights, they have absolutely nothing to do with them. They have no truck with trans people whatsoever. In fact, trans people, I would imagine, would be put to death by Hamas. So it's absolutely nonsense what they were saying yesterday. Let's talk about the thousands of trans rights activists gathering in London after that Supreme Court ruling. We also have a story, front page of the Mail on Sunday today, about ministers in a WhatsApp plot to defy the trans ruling. Well, it's the Supreme Court, and it is the highest court in this land. And why these ministers were having this discussion, I don't know. Okay, it's fine to disagree with what a court says. It's fine to criticise a court. That's okay. But you're the government of this country, and you would imagine what the Supreme Court says goes. It should anyway. Miranda Yardley is with me. She is a human rights activist. Miranda, thank you very much for joining me this morning. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. I'm not a she, I'm a bloke, as you can probably guess.
Okay, that's fine. Would you describe yourself as a trans woman or not at all?
Oh gosh, we're going to go down this rabbit hole.
No, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I'm just interested how you would describe yourself.
I don't think that men can become women. I'm a bloke who calls himself Miranda.
Okay, well that's absolutely fine. Well, Miranda, thank you for joining me, and you clearly accept what the Supreme Court have said this week.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely right. I mean, just to be clear about what the Supreme Court have said, is that as far as the Equality Act goes, the provisions of this law, which we've had for the last 15 years, are not trumped by the Gender Recognition Act. What a woman means in the Equality Act is a woman who is born as a woman. And I think that this is very, very important, because what has happened over the last 15 years since the Act has been released, and with the vacuum of public policy over this period, that lobby groups who make extremely good money out of offering what I would describe as being bonus legal guidance to institutions and organisations, what they've done is they've implemented what has become colloquially known as Stonewall law, which takes the ideas of the Equality Act and pretty much uses it to break down people's ability to describe boundaries. In fact, what the Equality Act does, really in a nutshell, is that it allows women to define boundaries for themselves as being women who are actually women, not men who LARP as women. Now, one might think that this is, that this is kind of a good thing for equality. Everybody should be entitled.
Sorry, Miranda, we're just struggling with your line there a little bit.
No negative discrimination.
Yeah, we're just struggling with the line there a little bit. I do apologise. We'll see if we can get Miranda back, even if it's just on the phone or something, because I do want to hear what Miranda has to say. But one thing I'm definitely concerned about is Labour ministers secretly plotting, the Mail on Sunday says, to defy the landmark court ruling. And this is the Culture Minister, Sir Chris Bryant, apparently joining an attack on Baroness Faulkner, who's chairwoman of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. Earlier in the day had said the ruling that a woman is defined by biological sex clearly meant trans women could not use single-sex female facilities in order to compete in women's sports. When an MP said Leolie Faulkner's words were pretty appalling, Mr. Bryant wrote, or Sir Chris I should say, wrote, agreed. And that's something that concerns me, because the rule of law is so incredibly important. Miranda, I think you're back with us. You were cut off there in your prime. Please tell us what you're saying there.
Cut off in my prime, story of my life. Yeah, so what I was saying is that this is, you've shown footage yesterday of this protest in central London by trans rights activists. I mean, if you go out and look at what some of the banners were saying, it's not a harmless public campaign for equality. Some of the banners that they are carrying, it's things like bring back burning witches and hang the turf. These people, they're advocating violence against women. It's rhetorical violence, and the use of rhetorical violence has been a constant and consistent trademark of the trans lobby forever. It's like, comply with what we want or you will face the consequences. And
I tell you something, if you're carrying a banner that said hang gay people, or indeed hang trans people, which nobody should ever carry because it's a hateful, horrible thing, I'm pretty sure the police would swoop.
Yeah, of course they would. Of course they would. And this is in exactly
Sorry, we're just struggling with the line again, Miranda. We'll leave it there. But listen, I think your points are made, and you make them very, very well indeed. And thank you for that. Penny in Essex says, in the prison I worked in several years ago now, a man who identified as female was imprisoned in our female prison. He had a penis, which delighted the inmates. Ludicrous. If someone has a penis, they are male. If they have a vagina and womb, they are female. There are only two sexes. The world has gone mad, says Penny in Essex. Brian in Worthing says, the biggest problem with this country is tolerance. The more tolerant you are with people, the more they just abuse it right across the board. Nothing is ever good enough for them, and our useless government give in to the minority and ignore the majority. When are we going to get a government that stands up to these people and start listening to the majority? How novel that would be. Jess says, I think you and David a minute ago are missing the point with the trans rights and pro-Palestinian demonstrators. I don't think they're conflating the two issues at all. They're not thinking of trans rights in Palestine. They're saying that the same group of people who support trans rights here are also the Palestinian cause there. Basically the view of most of the Labour Party. Jess, I agree with you. I don't think we're at cross purposes necessarily, but isn't it so ludicrous given that Hamas, who control the Gaza Strip, or certainly have for a very long time, 20 years really, they would be so incredibly hostile to trans people. So the two just don't go together at all. Cliff says, as a nation, we give far too much sway to single issue minority groups, all too often to the detriment of the majority. And Joe in Leicestershire says, morning Peter, and happy Easter to you. Happy Easter Joe, happy Easter everybody else. Regarding the trans debate, it's almost as if we've gone backwards from women's lib. Now these lobbyists are saying if you don't conform to traditional gender roles, then you must be in the wrong body. I've never been a girly girl. As a child I didn't do dolls, I preferred guns. Now as an adult I rarely wear dresses, I swear like a sailor, I don't flounce around in lipstick. And so now according to these deluded lobbyists, then I must be in the wrong body. I thought we had moved on from Victorian stereotyping. Clearly not. Well, there's lots more to talk about on this, and we'll get into what these government ministers have been saying and what Kemi Badenoch's been saying as well. We're going to the debate desk next. Be sure to get your view put forward, of course, as well. You can give me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222, as many of those people have, with the word talk in your text, so it comes up on the screen in front of me. I don't know where it goes if you don't put talk in it, but I don't see it anyway. And you can also send me a WhatsApp text message on that main number, or a voice note, 0344 499 1000. We've got Phil Dave, who is not backwards and coming forwards. He's going to be on the debate desk next, alongside Paul Richards, the former Labour advisor. Stay with us here on Talk.
The German capacity for refugees is exhausted. We've taken in millions of people from Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine. So we often think that the illegal migration problem is our problem. It's not. But this also then begs the question about if they're seeking asylum, as they will, because geographically you will go to Greece, say. You then move to Germany. You don't like Germany. The reason they come here is because we give them 5-star hotels and then we hotel them and we give them food and all the rest of it. Why would you go anywhere else?
Exactly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's go straight to the debate desk now. Phil Dave is with us. Hello, Phil. How are you doing? You all right?
Very well, thank you. And happy Easter to you, Peter.
Happy Easter, Phil. And Paul Richards is with us as well. Good to see you, Paul. How are you doing?
Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter. Paul is a former Labour Special Advisor, and Phil is top broadcaster, of course. Phil, I'm sure you were down in central London yesterday saying that trans rights are Palestinian rights. So there's two.
Oh,
two
absolutely,
causes,
yes. Two causes I feel very strongly about.
Well, you certainly feel strongly about them. I'm not sure you feel the same way as those protesters. What's your view on this?
I didn't say that. Look, I think it's very simple. It's turkeys for Christmas, to be honest with you. And if people are too dumb to realise that as you rightly identified before the break, that the leaders, so-called leaders anyway, of the people who identify as Palestinian, namely Hamas, if they were to enter their territory, there are people who have been killed for lesser things. Yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, anyone who is of LGBTQ community who thinks that it is in any way appropriate to support Hamas over what Israel is trying to achieve, then I frankly believe they just don't understand the Middle Eastern conflict.
They would say that the Palestinian cause is one of freedom, it's one of liberty, they want rights for people. Paul, would you put the two causes in the same bracket at all?
No, and I don't want to start the day by quoting Lenin, but it was Lenin who said the idea of a useful idiot. And I think a lot of these people in campaigns just sort of conflate all of these different trendy campaigns, just another badge to stick on a lapel, and think they're all the same, sort of anti-West, anti-capitalist, anti-whatever. And think they're all sort of, my enemy's enemy is my friend. But I mean, absolutely right, as Phil says, Hamas are no friend of any kind of freedom-loving individual or group, and to back them is to support the bad guys.
I will be brave enough to say, though, that I think I understand where a lot of the LGBT community are coming from when they try and jump on that bandwagon. At surface value, what they see are a load of people who, to many, are innocent getting caught up in a war, and they don't want to see the innocent dying. Now, I would like to say that anyone with half a decent brain would say that anyone who is truly innocent should never be caught up in war and doesn't deserve to die. But what I don't care for is the way that they don't seem to understand, for as long as they continue to support Hamas's efforts to actually fight back and ultimately destroy Israel and, on a wider level, the Jewish people of the world, then that's not going to make the people who identify as Palestinians' lives easier. In fact, on the contrary, what it would do is it would give some sort of gravitas to Hamas and actually will end up making their lives worse. And that's what annoys me, is they just don't understand the bigger picture.
I'd go a step further and say that one of the greatest obstacles to Palestinian statehood is all these idiots in the West who are supporting Hamas. And Hamas itself is obviously one of the main blocks to peace, but the people in the West who give them succour and cover are in fact, negating the calls for a legitimate calls for a Palestinian state.
And we're seeing many Palestinians, not many, but a few anyway, standing up and being incredibly brave and being killed for it, actually standing up to Hamas.
Well, I remember being in the West Bank and meeting with Palestinian trade unionists who had to have fled Gaza. This is a few years ago because they supported the Fatah faction of the PLO, and Hamas were going to shoot them. Yeah. These are Palestinian trade unionists, and they were saying Hamas is no friend of a Palestinian state.
Phil, can you just take us through this WhatsApp plot to defy the trans ruling? This is in the Mail on Sunday, and this is a few government ministers saying they're not happy with what the Supreme Court has said, including in them apparently the Culture Minister, Sir Chris Bryant. Just tell us a little bit of detail about this and also what you make of it.
Yeah, so, well, basically, you've obviously heard earlier in the week, the Supreme Court actually did sort of pass a ruling that says that a woman is defined by biological sex. As you rightly identify, there are some front benchers who have, amongst themselves, have been discussing and saying that they are outraged and appalled by what the Supreme Court has ruled. And needless to say that there are obviously several people who are up in arms about this because, frankly, it's once again proof that government ministers just are not listening to the will of an awful lot of people, you know. And
on the rule of law, because this is the Supreme Court here. This is the highest court in the land. We can disagree with sometimes with their decisions necessarily, but these are...
I frequently do. I'm sure we all do.
These are government ministers, Paul. I mean, this is supposedly a private chat. It's a WhatsApp discussion group between many Labour MPs, and these things do get out. How would you deal with this if you're on the inside, Paul?
Well, on the first point is, why do people ever write things down on WhatsApp? I mean, it's just an idiotic thing that they think it's secret. It never is. They always get out, exactly as you say. Maybe they intended this to, I don't know. But it does reflect a certain amount of disquiet, I think, within the Parliamentary Labour Party. And, you know, alas, I don't think the ruling is going to just end the discussion and the debate. And as we all know, it's a debate incredibly filled with vitriol and violence and unpleasantness and name-calling, and, you know, it's very divisive.
Is Labour very split over this, do you think?
I think no more than any other, you know, political kind of institution. I think it's not a left-right thing. I just think there are people taking very different views and then entrenching those views and, you know, cancelling each other, and just it's a terribly toxic debate. And I think I've always said, if we can't just get together and organise some public policy around protecting the rights of the minority and the majority, and organising, you know, where we go to the loo, I don't think, you know, that's beyond us. If we can put people into space, why can't we do it with this?
But what's ridiculous is, though, that most of this stuff that you've just spoken about actually already exists anyway, is because an awful lot of places do have same-sex facilities now, whether it's by design or whether it's by happy coincidence, because for many a year now we have had to, by law, any new build or any changes to building have had to include spaces where people who maybe have different abilities are able to use facilities. And of course, I think anyone with their right mind could see the sense in that. Now, if that is the case, and if someone is genuinely that upset about using a facility that is designed for either a male or a female, and I mean biological male or female, then there is that third option of using the sort of the what are rather crassly dubbed disabled facilities.
But those the disabled campaigners will say, hang on a minute, we've campaigned for 50 years to get our rights to accessible toilets. You know, why are we now having that right diluted? That would be the argument.
But I wouldn't say that it's diluted. I think, you know, if ultimately it means that it's a reasonable alternative to someone actually sharing a single-sex space, then I am sure that sort of a few more people who would actually join that proverbial queue of using said facilities, it shouldn't be such a big deal. But what really annoys me, I think, more than anything, is the way that we seem to live in a day and age where we are obsessed with pandering to the minority. And this is what it boils down to. You know, I don't remember off the top of my head exactly what the figure is, but the trans community of this country is something like 0.025% or something like that.
It's about 0.5.
0.5, right, beg your pardon. Okay, right, even so, 0.5% of the community we're talking about, of the country as a whole here we're talking about. Why is it we give so much airtime to this nonsense? And I don't mean just on this station, I mean in general. I'm very sorry, but if there is that small a number of people who are unhappy, then why are we upsetting the majority for it? It doesn't make sense.
I don't think you're that sorry, Phil, to be honest. The Labour Party's evolving stance on this, I think. Paul, you perhaps realise this. I don't think Phil Dave was at Labour Party conference over the last couple of years, but Labour, of course, like majority of political parties, has a big conference. And 2 years ago, I went into the loos and there were unisex, and the urinals were actually sort of covered over and everybody had to use the same, both male and female toilets were all unisex. Then last year, exactly the same facilities in exactly the same building, there were male and female, and I just thought that was a sort of interesting kind of metaphor almost for the Labour Party and how it was viewed, because 1 year they were unisex, the next year they weren't.
I mean, I've done 30 annual Labour Party conferences. I can't say I've ever noticed the toilets at all.
Okay,
I do use them, but there we are. That's very eagle-eyed of you.
There were a few people who weren't too happy with 2 years ago.
I mean, but the broader point is you can construct toilets that have cubicles with a wash basin in them, and anyone can go in and out, and everyone feels safe, and it's not hard to do this. You know, the problem is the vitriol in the debate, isn't it? And it's, you know, toilets are a metaphor for a much bigger argument playing out about who is a woman and who isn't.
I don't know if everyone does feel safe, you know, because there are some women who would say that, you know, a thin cubicle door standing between them and someone who potentially could cause them some sort of discomfort or harm is not a way of making them feel safe. This is the whole point.
And the security and safety issue is, of course, a big thing, but also it's just about privacy, which a lot of people really think about as well. And I
I mean, this is short confession, but I never use urinals anyway. I think they're filthy, horrible things, and I would always use the cubicle as a man in a male toilet.
Really? You don't use urinals?
No, never. All my life.
Never bothered me. I think
they're revolting.
Okay.
You're basically peeing in the open air.
You don't touch them, though.
What I was going to say, then I don't think any part of a facility is supposed to be pleasant. But you say it's revolting. The whole thing's revolting.
Well, a cubicle with a door on it, I think, is always my preferred. I will wait for that to come up rather than use the urinal.
Paul, I have learned something new about you.
Bombshell
this
Sunday morning. There you go.
Andy in Woolwich has been in touch and says, "Hi Peter, I'm a 63-year-old gay man. These trans activists don't want equality. They want privilege. End of. Great show." Leslie in Kent says, "I have no problem with everyone having their rights, but why do the rights of such a small minority trump the rights of 50% of the population?" says Leslie. Simon in Devon says, "It's now become very clear that the trans debate and protests have been hijacked by violent Marxist groups and every ism that you can think of, and the mental gymnastics required to be some Labour MPs to accept that a woman is an adult human female must be exhausting. Happy Easter," says Simon.
I don't think Marx had an awful lot to say about trans rights, to be honest. I mean, these calling them a Marxist, I'm not sure that's right, but anyway.
Okay. Another person says, "I wonder where the lefties are brainwashed to think that they all think the same. They all seem to be pro-EU, pro-Palestinian, pro-NHS, pro-immigration, anti-Thatcher, anti-wealth, anti-bankers. They want corporates to pay more and more tax, so they all seem to believe the climate change scam. How can so many people have such beliefs ingrained in them?" And I particularly enjoyed this one from Frank Etchells in Bingley in West Yorkshire. He says, "Great to see Phil Dave back on the show, and how nice of him to call in on his way to his audition for Bugsy Malone." Happy Easter, one and all.
I think that's what you call a backhander, but thank you for the message.
Well, Frank, you give a little love. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Ukraine is a huge issue and continues to be, and we've heard from the Russian President Vladimir Putin, who has said that there is a 30-hour ceasefire. A lot of people don't believe him and think that certainly these acts are still being perpetrated by Russia. I wonder what you think of what Vladimir Putin is saying, Phil Dave.
Yeah, well, I think it's very easy to suggest that Vladimir Putin has not necessarily been known in the past for telling the truth on many matters that he has commented on. But I think it always sort of says as well that there are always two sides to every story, and the bottom line is that I can't profess to have been to either Russia or Ukraine to actually sort of get on the ground and see for myself exactly the kind of behaviour that either side play a part in. Now, I don't personally sort of believe that out of the two countries that Ukraine is the bad side, if you like. Here, I believe that a lot of it is based on Russian aggression, and that as a result of it, Russia are typically the ones who would potentially sort of be the likely candidates to break a ceasefire. My problem is, though, that of course, that sort of sitting here talking about something that I don't fully understand and professing to be an expert on it is exactly the kind of thing I try and counter when it comes to conflict in the Middle East. So I don't want to be a hypocrite and start sort of saying it's definitely this, it's definitely that. But from what I can see, it would appear as though that Russia doesn't necessarily have too much incentive at the moment to stop the aggression towards Ukraine.
Well, it's more than that, isn't it? They think they're on the winning side now. Now that Trump has decisively changed sides in the middle of a war, and
do you think it's fair to say that? Do you think he's on the Russian side now?
Yeah, I think if he isn't an actual Russian asset, he is certainly behaving like one, and he is giving Putin an awful lot of tacit support, I would say, and blaming Ukraine for all kinds of things. Trump will now blame Ukraine for breaking this so-called truce, which didn't exist in the first place, and use that as a Russia as leverage against Ukraine. And of course, withdrawing the support and withdrawing the diplomatic support and military support is helping Putin. And a decisive moment of a war, which is hitherto in stalemate, but is now going to be much more fluid, I think. So, yeah, I think Trump is on the side of Russia.
But it is fair to say, though, that even though, I mean, sort of, if we put Trump to one side, it is essential that things don't just carry on indefinitely as they have been for a long time. I mean, look at Crimea. Crimea was invaded, in 2014, I think it was, off the top of my head.
That's right.
And still, people talk about sort of Russia invading Crimea and nothing has ever actually necessarily been done about it. How many years is the West prepared to hoof endless amounts of money into a war that potentially has no resolution?
Well, it has a resolution. The resolution is the invader being repelled back to the borders with Russia and Ukraine being a sovereign nation. Well, if Europe decided to do it, we could. And, without the Americans, we could do it. And I think it is important, actually, for the geopolitics and for our safety and for
What's
democracy.
it got to do with our safety, Paul?
Well, because if the Russians think they can win and do manage to invade the rest of Ukraine, they will then go for Moldova, and then they'll look at the Baltics, and the whole of that border with us, with Europe, starts to crumble. I mean, they are an invading force, and if they can get away with it, they will.
But where is the evidence that they've done that? They've invaded a fifth of Ukraine. They've only ever done this military feint.
Well, hang on, they thought they were going to invade all of Ukraine. They got stopped in their tracks. They thought it would take 3 weeks, and 3 years on, they failed, but they wanted to take the whole country.
Which again comes to my question, where is the evidence that we're at risk?
Because they'll keep going.
I mean, but they haven't done that, and they haven't been able to.
Because they've been stopped so far. But if they could get away with it, that's why I'm saying it's so decisive right now, is because if they thought they could get away with it, if they thought they could get away with attacking a NATO nation and America wouldn't do anything, then they would.
But they haven't attacked a NATO nation so far, and they could have. Well, they could have easily.
That's why I think it's hanging in the balance.
But they could. I don't think it's hanging in the balance at all. They could have attacked a NATO nation if they'd wanted to. They haven't done that. They haven't chosen to do that. I think they're waiting to see
what Trump will do.
Well, I would suggest that sort of with Russia on its own, then I would agree with what you say, that sort of the West could club together, whether it's just Europe or whether or not it is including America, and possibly could fight back towards Russia. However, the problem that you've got, I think we need to look at the bigger picture here, is that Russia are clearly trying to jump into bed with the likes of North Korea, China and other parts of the world.
Who are fighting in Ukraine, by the way. They send troops.
That's right.
Who are obviously sort of more on Putin's way of thinking. And that's where I would start to be a little bit concerned about it, because then I believe, yes, that absolutely collectively could pose a massive threat to the West as we know it. And there's already a quite substantial threat facing the West in the form of radicalism that we see in many parts of the West. So I believe that sort of we shouldn't be burying our heads in the sand about this, but we clearly need to change tactics somehow, and I just don't believe that hurling money at Ukraine and hoping that they will be able to fight them off for us is the way forward. If you ask me what the answer is, I'm not 100% sure.
I was going to say, what's the answer?
No, as I say, I'm not 100% sure, but clearly what we've been doing for the last 3 years as a collective in the Western world has not worked. So maybe we do need to think again, but I don't know what the answer is.
I just want to look at a little bit of footage that has emerged in the last 24 hours. This is Russia snatching men from gyms in a conscription drive. Apparently Vladimir Putin has signed an order to conscript 160,000 men in the country's biannual co-op. This is the largest since 2011. I'll talk you through this footage from, it's very, very disturbing footage in a gym in Russia, and this is military officers coming in, putting young men who are in the gym, telling them to lie down on the floor, apparently conscripting them forcibly and taking them in to be trained to become soldiers in the Russian army. It's very, very disturbing footage. It's emerged over the last 24 hours or so. The Kremlin essentially snatching men from gyms to join Putin's forces. Conscription is obviously something that hasn't happened in this country for a very, very long time. What do you make of this footage, Paul?
Well, it's horrific. I mean, when they're not stealing children from families, they're now taking young men out of their families and conscripting them. That's why they need to rely on, North Korea and China to supply men as well. But I think in the UK, I don't think we want, conscription back into the United Kingdom, but I do think we need to double the size of the UK army, and the investment that this government is going to be putting into defence, it can't all go on equipment. It has to go on
some of it's gone to Ukraine, Paul.
Yeah, but I think
we're sending £3 billion a year to Ukraine.
Yeah, good, and we should send more. But as we've cut the aid budget, we're putting it into defence, but it needs to also now increase the size of the armed forces. And I think that's this is now Labour's animating mission: is rearmament of Europe. That's what we're about now.
Yeah, I mean, let's first and foremost strongly disagree with we should be sending more to Ukraine. I like I said, we need to sort of think very carefully about tactics, no doubt about it, and make sure that we fight off Russia in whichever way we can. But I don't believe that sort of just hurling endless amounts of money when the state of our country is something to cry over is necessarily sort of the right way forward. However, when it comes to conscription, I would suggest that actually I do agree with conscription. I would not deny that if I was...
You'd fight for this country?
I would be terrified. I'm going to level with you if I was to fight for the country. I think anyone in their right mind would be. But I also believe that we have something worth fighting for, and we have to protect it at all costs. And the truth is, you've got plenty of people who have come over here for years and years professing that they want to make a better life for themselves in the UK, but actually sort of it's been almost the detriment of this country if we haven't been able to cope with infrastructure, with all of the new people who have come here. What better way to prove that they want to live a life in this country as we knew it by actually fighting for it? I think we need to encourage those who do come over here, whether it be legally or illegally, whichever way it is, and say, right, you want to prove your love for this country? Fight for us, help us, and conscript to the army and see how long that lasts.
Lots coming in on the trans debate. Neil says, Cardi P, happy Easter to you and the team, with reference to the whole trans discussion. These groups make up around 0.04% of the population, but over the last few years the whole news cycle has been dominated with stories about this group. How can this be? And to be honest, when you actually have real trans people on your show, they're perfectly reasonable people like your last guest. The reality is there is a cohort of anarchists who will jump on any trope, says Neil. Well, certainly I'll be honest, we do sometimes have trouble getting people who are on the more on the stronger side of that argument. I know Julie Hartley-Brewer spoke to a non-binary person this week, and that person decided to walk off the set. That is on YouTube if you want to have a look. Mark in Devon says, I can't believe that I agree with Paul, but yes, urinals are disgusting. As a man, I also never use them and always use a cubicle. Great show as always, says Mark from Devon. So thank you for that. Alan in the EU, he says, just a quote that fits the discussion: Western countries are not divided by colour, race, religion and sexual preference. Western countries are divided into the wise and foolish. The foolish are the ones that divide themselves into colour, race, religion and sexual preference. Great show, loving the news, sanity shining through. Happy Easter, says Alan. Plenty more to discuss. We'll talk about the Middle East, we'll talk about Labour looking to Denmark for inspiration to tackle illegal migration, and I think we'll probably take a call on the other side of the break as well. Let's do that. If you want to get your voice on the air, 0344 499 1000.
Third party than any other party in modern times.
They do, but it also goes back to Mike's point, which is actually when you get 4 million votes, as Reform did in the last election, and 5 members of Parliament, when you skew that, it just shows how
it shows you what an absurd situation it is. But the problem is they need each other to some extent.
Do they?
The Conservatives need a leader like Nigel Farage, who's without doubt the most charismatic
what about
in the
Kevin
country. Badenoch? She is a disaster.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Joan is in Sunderland and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Joan, you're very welcome to the programme. You're on with me and also Paul Richards and Phil Dave. What would you like to say this morning, Joan?
I just want to say about the kerfuffle about the Supreme Court ruling.
Yes.
We have waited so long for such a ruling to be made about something that was patently obvious to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And as I say, I just get exasperated. And I hope a lot of people like me, I have nothing against how people want to live their lives.
Me neither, Joan. And I'm sure you, like me, and I don't think anybody has this morning, would want to make life more difficult for any trans person. It's a tough thing to deal with, but we also have to deal with facts and deal with biology, Joan, don't we?
We do. But I just can't understand why the silent majority accept this, and a very tiny group of people make so much noise and cause so much problems.
But the thing is, they're a small group. That's right, Joan. And I would say that the trans lobby is different from trans people, although often they're the same people, of course. But the problem is that it is a very small number of people. But nonetheless, it affects everybody. It affects all women, for example. It affects all men. If what the trans lobby want to kind of happens, well, then that affects all of us, Joan, doesn't it?
It does. But I'm also getting quite upset about this Labour lot who are planning to go against the ruling that has taken so long and has cost so much money and was so patently obvious. But if anything comes of this, we've listened to policing, to justice. If the Labour Party allows anything to, I don't know how to describe it, you know what I mean, be put forward about
yes.
Starmer can no longer stand there and say that there's no such thing as two-tier justice.
Well, Starmer hasn't said anything on the trans issue so far. Joan, first of all, thanks for your comments, Joan, this morning. That was Joan in Sunderland. Starmer hasn't said anything about this so far. Paul, should he?
Well, I think he'll just accept the ruling of the Supreme Court. I mean, he's a lawyer by training and by instinct, and I think that the Supreme Court has made its views abundantly clear, and that should now inform lawmaking going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be very difficult for someone like Starmer, who obviously is that kind of legal eagle, to turn round and then start to disagree with the Supreme Court. At the end of the day, that is and was his career before he became politician, before he became Prime Minister. So he's not going to go and speak out against it.
Should he apologise to Rosie Duffield, Paul?
No, I don't think so. But I do think that this chatter on the WhatsApp groups sort of is not helpful. I think the government now just needs to speak with one voice and say we accept the rule of law.
Okay. Should he apologise to Rosie Duffield, do you think? The MP, now an independent MP, of course, who feels she was hounded out of the Labour Party because of her views on this?
I think that if he was to do that, it would be a sign of weakness, and Starmer doesn't strike me as someone who wants to openly be seen to do that. But make no mistake, I think that he would be thinking again about whether or not what Rosie Duffield actually did say was worth actually taking seriously in the first place. Now,
I don't think Starmer has that strong beliefs in very many things, but what I do know is that he's absolutely ruthless. And has shown that on many occasions. And you have to be Prime Minister. You have to get to that stage.
It is self-fulfilling, isn't it? I mean,
yes, it is. You cannot get to Prime Minister without having a sliver of ice in your heart. Most people. I don't think there's too many cuddly people who've been Prime Minister. Let's talk a little bit about Macron. He is going to beat Trump to a state visit. What do we make of this, Phil? Will you be welcoming, will you sing bonjour to President Macron?
I can't wait for Monsieur Macron to grace us with his presence in this country. If you believe that, you'll believe anything. I don't care, honestly, and he's just such a joke. I don't understand why France keeps putting themselves through electing him time and time again. He's just a really clearly awful human being, and I don't understand why on earth we should be welcomed with open arms. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I do understand why people would find someone like Donald Trump a bit of a divisive character. Let's be honest, he's not exactly backwards in going forwards, but at the same time, he seems to speak an awful lot more to the, it was Joan who was saying the silent majority, than Macron ever could. He just seems to be one of the elitist politicians who seems to take pleasure in causing misery on his country. Personally, I wouldn't want him here if I could throw him, but anyway.
What do you think? Will you be welcoming Macron?
I will welcome him. I mean, he was seen as the great hope for centrist politics a few years ago. He's been a bit disappointing since, but I mean, the bigger picture is, though, of course, we need to be really close to our allies in Europe, including France, you know, on the migration issue, on the defence issue, on the economic issue. We need to be cozying up to all of these European nations now. So, welcome. We'll wave our tricolours in the street.
You'll be there. You'll be there singing La Marseillaise.
I'm sorry, when have France ever given us the impression that they're any ally of ours, the way that they have been behaving recently in terms of throwing migrants over here? It's almost like they're being encouraged to get on those small boats, and in spite of paying them goodness only knows how much money. So I personally think that if France really want to show they're a true ally, help us with our ongoing invasion rather than just coming over here and paying a visit to His Majesty.
I mean, that is true, but that's the sort of thing they can discuss when he's here, isn't it? That's why it's good that he's here. We can raise our concerns.
It's been discussed. They haven't done anything about it.
Let's keep up the pressure, I would say.
I want to play a couple of voice notes. I'm being told to take a break, but I think we've taken all the breaks we need to take before now and 11 o'clock. Is that correct? Yeah, I thought so. Yes, but I want to play a couple of voice notes now. Anna has a voice note about the trans issue. This is what Anna has to say.
Morning, Peter. Anna, sorry. Peter, there is no such thing as a trans man or a trans woman. There are men and there are women. Transgender reassignment is a surgical procedure, as is having your tonsils removed. We don't refer to people with no tonsils as tons people. The only in between is a hermaphrodite, and you can test that with blood sample as to whether male or female. The thing I would do with these people is refer them to psychiatric evaluation, because I truly believe that they are body dysmorphic or dysfunctional. But let's just stop making them important.
Okay, Anna, thanks for your very strong views on that. Mark?
Morning, Peter. It's Mark in Lancashire. The thing I'd like to know is what happened to all the people we used to refer to as transvestites, i.e. people who like to dress in the clothing preferred by the opposite sex, men in women's underwear and men in dresses, normally because they sort of got off in it in some way, didn't they? Well, now they're all referred to as transgenders, and all the transvestites no longer exist, apparently. So just like during COVID, when flu totally disappeared and it's all now COVID, now during this rise of the transgender phenomenon, there's no such thing as a transvestite. Or really? Well, my opinion is most of these people are simply transvestites. They're just men who like to dress up in women's clothing. Suddenly, they want acceptance and want to be called female. Well, no, the court's decided it's not happening. That's not the law, so forget it, trannies.
Is not nice, really. I'm not banning it. I'm not saying that you don't have free speech on this station. I'm just saying it's probably not just the nicest thing to do. There are people who are transsexual. There are people who are transgender. There are people who are certainly transvestites. We don't use those words anymore. Why do you think the wording has changed, Phil?
I think basically because of political correctness. I would say that, just to pick up on what Mark was saying there, you know, that he does raise some valid points, if not quite strong views, but hey, all views are welcome. It's more about how I believe that we, how can I put this delicately? This might shock people when I say this, but when it comes to people who are transsexual or believe they are body dysmorphic, I actually have a huge deal of respect for anyone who wants to undertake reassignment surgery. I believe that anyone who wants to go through that is going to put themselves through a lot, and they must know they're going to come up against one heck of a backlash from society and also possibly even their family and their friends. But here's where I have a problem with it. It's do what you want. I'm a great believer in live the life you want to live, but don't tell me I'm wrong for thinking in a certain way. You know, you can't, at the end of the day, how many times do we hear that the science proves various bits and pieces pieces. Well, frankly, science proves that there are two biological sexes. There are men and there are women. There are some people who clearly have some sort of imbalance or something that means that they don't feel complete as either male or female. And I think that is something to be not pitied, but it's not the right word, but you know what I mean. It's something that you shouldn't just dismiss someone who feels like that. There is obviously something going on there. Whether it's psychiatric, I don't know. I'm not going to profess to be an expert on that. But I do believe that everyone has the right to live the life in which they please. I just don't want anyone turning around and saying that the majority of people are wrong to believe that there are men and there are women and that there is not really anything in between. And I personally am like that myself.
Okay.
So,
I want to...
It's not that long since gay people were described as being mentally ill and we put into psychiatric treatment for that. It's only within our living memory that is true. So I think dismissing people who say, oh, they're just mental, is really the wrong thing to do.
Of course. And we need to be, as I say, I don't want to make life any more difficult for any trans person, but I also want to deal in facts. Let's leave that just for the meantime. We will return to this later in the programme, and if you have views on it you want to air, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. Maybe you think Paul and Phil and I are talking absolute nonsense, the three Ps, talking nonsense. Tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about a different story now, which is on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. This is Britain needs us to defeat Islamists, says the Israeli minister, Israel's foreign minister, has said it is clearly in the interest of Britain for his country, Israel, to prevail in its fight against radical Islamists. This is an interview with the Sunday Telegraph. He said the result of the conflict in the Middle East, including the war in Gaza, would influence Muslim communities in Europe. Paul, what do you make of this?
Well, I'm no great fan of the Israeli government because it's a very right-wing government, but I do believe, obviously, in Israel's right to exist. And the foreign minister here is making a point that that we have common enemies, which is this perverted ideology that which we call Islamism. Very confusingly, very similar to the word Islam, which causes an awful lot of confusion. But Islamism is a political ideology, which is about tearing down the West.
Yeah, it's a murderous ideology. Yeah.
Indeed, it is, and we've seen its implications in this country in terms of actual bombings and radical violence in this country. Never mind the Middle East. So, in this sense, that there is obviously common cause there. So, yeah, I mean the point, should we be a friend of Israel in its existential struggle, then the answer, of course, is yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of the point that Gideon Saar is trying to make in this, which he does raise, I believe, a perfectly valid point, is that he's saying that the West shouldn't be fooled into thinking that if, in the unlikely event that Israel doesn't triumph in this effort in Gaza to try and destroy Hamas's infrastructure there, that suddenly the problem is just going to go away, because it is not. Islamism, as we have seen, is a massive threat to the Western world, and unfortunately it has taken gross advantage of hiding behind Islam, which of course by and large as a religion is quite a peaceful religion, and people always argue that, but it is true that it is the case that because they have hidden behind it, and anyone who dare to speak out against Islamism is somehow a racist, that is how they have managed to infiltrate the West to the degree that they've managed to do.
Isn't it? The word Islamism is so open to misinterpretation, and people willfully, confusing and conflating it with Islam. That's our problem. If we called it something else and we understood it,
couldn't agree more.
Then we'd be in business, wouldn't we?
Because you see, one of the other problems as well is that sort of as a result of it, they're playing on an awful lot of people's emotions here. They play on people who do follow Islam's emotions by basically saying to them that you're our brothers and sisters, you should stand up, and it puts them in an impossible position as well.
I definitely want to get to the lack of vegan stir fries for the Just Stop Oil activist in prison, which I'm sure is making us all deeply upset. But what I want to talk about just before then is this huge survey by an organisation called More in Common, revealing that the Reform UK leader Nigel Farage is in joint pole position to make it into Downing Street in 4 years' time. Prime Minister Farage, Phil?
I believe he could do it. Whether or not I would personally support, I don't know. But then again, we are in a time of purdah, so I'm not going to declare too much. It would take a huge change, wouldn't it, politically? It would take an awful lot of MPs to be elected for Reform UK, an unprecedented earthquake politically for this to happen. I think what we can all observe is that traditional conservatism in this country has long gone, OK? You could argue that literally since the days of Thatcher have we not seen true conservative values in this country. Because even when David Cameron came in 2010 with Nick Clegg in that Liberal and Conservative coalition. I don't believe from that moment onwards that we saw true conservatism come back to the country's governing party. But if you were to say to me, do I believe that Nigel Farage has what it takes to be a Prime Minister? I believe that he's got a certain appeal to him that would sort of go and appeal to a lot of people in this country. Okay. But I can't say with any certainty, yes, I think he would.
Just briefly, Paul?
Well, it's not going to happen, is it? Because our electoral system and the fact we have first past the post mitigates against him taking the sort of 300 plus seats that he would need to in order to form a government. I mean, possibly some sort of coalition maybe, but the votes he's taking are off the Conservatives, and that helps Labour.
I definitely want to talk about this Louise Lancaster, who is a prisoner. She's just off oil mum. She's talked about life in prison. There's no vegan stir fry. Apparently, her children, Tristan, Verity, and Theo. Dear God. Yes. Yes. Now, in fairness, she did lose some weight. She went down to 8 kilograms, lost 8 kilograms in Bronzefield, which is a women's prison, where she spent the first 3 months of her sentence. But she was often hungry, largely due to the scarcity of vegan protein. Peanut butter saved me, she said. Phil, I know you're very upset about this.
Yeah, I'm absolutely mortified. Might I suggest don't break the law in the first place, or don't encourage others to break the law, because in particular with this case of Louise Lancaster, it's important to stress she wasn't necessarily involved in the protests on the M25 in 2022, which is actually sort of the fundamental basis of a lot of her sentencing, but she was involved in the organisation of it, and this is part and parcel of the problem. Look, the upshot is that when you stop patients who are going through cancer getting to their treatment because you believe that the world is going to explode tomorrow because of some myth, as far as I'm concerned, you deserve to be imprisoned. I do not care at all whether or not she had access to the food she wants. Bread and water all the way, like it or lump it, don't break the law.
Briefly?
Well, I think the problem with this kind of protest is we do live in a democracy. I think it's legitimate if it was a dictatorship, but it's not. It's a democracy. So trying to clog up the streets and, as you say, disrupt businesses and people getting to hospital is not on. She does seem to have taken it all like a bit of a joke, though, which makes me worry about the penal system.
Well, I worry about the Whole Truth 5, including Cressida Gethin and Lucia Whitaker de Abreu. They're the ones I worry about. I wonder if there are any non-middle class people who are in Just Stop Oil. I'm not sure. Apparently not. Listen, thank you on the debate desk to the marvellous Phil Dave and the equally brilliant Paul Richards. I appreciate your thoughts on that. Please keep all your thoughts coming in. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Mary Dejevsky and Philip Ingram in a second about what on earth is going on in Ukraine. Is there a ceasefire? Is there not? What's Putin saying? Is it true? Where does it go from here? We're to talk about the Easter travel chaos too. Stay with us here on Talk.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth at this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt in Royston, that it's not even their idea. but they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
We're everywhere.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Sunday morning. A very happy Easter to everybody who is watching and listening. We're going to talk in just a second about what on earth is happening in Ukraine, because Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, says there is now a 30-hour ceasefire. Now, some people say that ceasefire actually isn't even happening. Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, says they need a lot longer than that to try to get to the bottom of where peace could be and where it could go. The Americans, of course, have thoughts on this too, as do Philip Ingram and Mary Dejevsky, who'll be with me in a second. We'll reflect on the Easter travel chaos, if you're maybe coming back or travelling today. Simon Calder will have all the thoughts for you on that. We'll talk as well about lorry drivers perhaps needing a bit of mental health help. I know there are loads of HGV drivers who watch and listen to this programme, as do their families, and I was just really struck by a charity called Breaker, which has started to raise awareness of the mental ill health of drivers in the haulage industry. I'd love to hear from people who are affected by this. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about dangerous dogs, potholes, and the trans rights debate continues. Lots of people getting in touch on that. So let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. You know me, I'll take as many calls and texts and tweets and all the rest of it as I can between now and 1 o'clock. 0344 499 1000. That does three things. You can give me a call, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can send me a WhatsApp voice message. Less than a minute, please, if you would. Also, you can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads to discuss here on Talk. Stay with us between now and 1 o'clock. Well, Ange has been in touch from Edinburgh, and she says older trans women on David's show made a very important point on how the trans umbrella now includes transvestites, which has caused issues for those with genuine gender dysphoria. I genuinely believe that third spaces won't work, as the most rabid amongst the activists want their demands met. It's nothing to do with rights. Conscription is something we're talking about as well. There's some very disturbing footage of men being conscripted in Russia. We'll play that again in a second. And this person says the talk about conscription in this country is ridiculous. I have twin 19-year-olds and I would do everything I can to make sure they didn't have to fight. When will we realise that we need to concentrate on making our country safe before we pretend to be something that we are clearly not? And Patricia has been in touch and says, good morning, Peter. I'm all for freedom to love, dress, live, worship, whoever and however you want, until it opposes the rights of women who fought hard and died for them. Well, we know, of course, that those trans rights activists, some of them anyway, defaced a statue of Millicent Fawcett yesterday, the heroic suffragist, and that happened in central London yesterday by trans rights activists who simply don't respect the rule of law. Right then, let's talk about Ukraine and Russia. Mary Dejevsky is with us, foreign affairs columnist for The Independent. She was with us yesterday, but I'm delighted she's here again today because things have changed rapidly, Mary, in the last 24 hours. We'll come to you in just a second. Philip Ingram is a former senior military intelligence officer and is with us too. Philip, what is going on here, do you think?
Well, Vladimir Putin has listened to the noise that's coming out of the White House and thought, oh, I'm going to try and keep Donald Trump on side, and unilaterally declared a 30-hour ceasefire that finishes at midnight Moscow time tonight without actually telling anyone beforehand. And I don't think he's told his troops on the front line.
Why is he doing this, Mary, do you think?
Well, I don't completely disagree with Mr. Ingram, I think that there was a message actually also to Russia. It's interesting that neither of us is actually saying that the primary message was to Ukraine. But I think it was also to Russia because it sends a message to Russians who may have been concerned about the fact that the war may not be... Russia is making progress, but it's making very slow progress. It's also getting very, very bad publicity abroad for carrying on with attacks into Ukrainian cities. And I think that this was a message it was on the eve of Orthodox Easter, and Putin was going to go, as he customarily does, to the midnight Easter Mass. And I think maybe the contrast that people might have seen between Putin at the midnight church service and bombing Ukrainian cities, that, even for Russia, that was probably not a good set of images to have. So I think the message was directed, yes, certainly to the Americans, but also, I think, to the Russians themselves.
I'm going to ask you both the same question. How convinced are you that Vladimir Putin wants to end this war, Mary?
I'm absolutely convinced he wants to end the war because I think that there are bigger considerations for Putin and for Russia, that Russia doesn't like being outside what it sees as the international mainstream. It can survive there. It can do deals with China. It can host all sorts of members of G27 and hold military parades. But I think Putin and Russia think that their place is in the international mainstream. That's the first thing. Second thing is that I think that Putin sees a real chance here to see peace in Ukraine is not just by itself. It has to be seen in the context of why Russia started this war in the first place, which was to do with Russia's security. And if he can get some sort of start to a new arms control process, new security talks for the whole of Europe, then I think that's what he's aiming at. He's aiming at something much, much bigger than just peace in Ukraine.
Again, Philip, I wonder if you agree with Mary, and similarly, whether you are convinced in any way that Vladimir Putin wants to end this war.
I've got a slightly different view to Mary.
You shock me.
In that, yes, Putin wants an end to the war, but only on his terms. And his terms are the retention of the territory that he's got at the moment, but the expansion of that to the whole of the Donbass region, so that he can set the conditions for Ukraine not to be welcomed back into or brought into wider parts of the international community, giving Putin at some stage the opportunity in the future to destroy Ukraine as a sovereign country. Putin does not want Ukraine to exist. He's not worried about getting back into the international community again. What his ultimate goal is trying to grow the Russian Federation into the old USSR with him as the Tsar at the center. If he was concerned about the expansion of NATO and other international organizations, he wouldn't have started the fight in the first place. NATO's growing. He's failed in his strategic objective from the very beginning. He's now trying to play catch up. He thinks he can play Donald Trump in the United States, and he'll do that as much as he possibly can, whilst he tries to disrupt different political mechanisms across Europe to try and so Europe can't hold him to account. Putin only wants an end to the war on his terms.
And Philip, I asked Mary about this yesterday. I wonder what you make of Donald Trump and the fact that he has essentially said, and Marco Rubio as well, their Foreign Minister, Secretary of State is his title, that essentially if these talks don't have some sort of action, don't have some sort of progress fairly soon, that actually the Americans could move on to something else. What do you make of that, Philip?
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. It's something that I'd said way back in the beginning, whenever Donald Trump started to put the pressure on Ukraine and seemed to be accepting everything that Russia came in. He'll either walk away completely, abandoning all support for Europe and for Ukraine. He will. He could turn around and give huge amounts of support to Ukraine to teach Vladimir Putin a lesson. Trump is being embarrassed by this, but his priorities are elsewhere. His priorities from everything that he's been saying are China, China, and China. And of course, he's got the Middle East that is causing him difficulties in dealing with that. So he wants to focus on other things.
Final thought from Mary, please.
Yes, I mean, I don't disagree that Trump's prime priority is China. But I do think that he will think twice before giving up on on discussions, at least with Russia, that having opened communications, I don't think he'll want to shut them down just like that. Also, I think, in a way, the rest of us have to think about the consequences of that, because what that is going to mean is basically defeat over some timetable for Ukraine, because the Europeans cannot replace the support that's coming from the Americans. If the Americans abandon the whole process, that is very, very bad for Ukraine.
Thank you both very much. That's Mary Dejevsky there, Foreign Affairs columnist at The Independent, and also Philip Ingram, a former senior military intelligence officer. Thank you to them both. Peter has given me a ring from Dorset. The number he's given me a ring on is 0344 499 1000. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hello, good morning to you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
I don't quite understand the world. When the Berlin Wall was there, we had fortifications right the way down the border. Everybody was doing 2 years national service for a time after the Second World War. We weren't at war fighting Russia, but that's what we were buffered against. And I don't understand, why aren't they just hell for leather sorting out some kind of a buffer border, including Ukraine, including all the little states? Who cares what Putin wants and what he's doing? He's an absolute aggressor. We had the same situation with the race to Berlin after the Second World War, and we had to keep the Russians out. And now we've got to keep the Russians out. And if we had conscription, the productivity of Europe would probably go up overnight after conscription, because suddenly the youth of today would have a bit of backbone and be able to actually do stuff.
And Peter, I'm sure there are a lot of people who would agree with you, but my point, I suppose, any military person I speak to says, we don't want people who don't want to be there. We don't want people who are going to moan and complain and their heart won't be in it. If you go through basic training in the military, which I never have and never will, but it breaks you down and builds you up again. But it's generally, the general thought is that people want to be there. They want to be in the Army, Navy, or Marines, or the Air Force. But for so many people, it's just completely outside what they want to do. And conscription would be something that is just totally beyond their abilities. It may well be beyond what they want to do with their life.
And what about the possibilities of having a kind of blend of conscription and trades?
Yeah, well, they do sort of. I mean, that idea, they do sort of national service, and if in Germany, for example, you can either join the military, or you can for a year, or you can do you could care for people, for example. You could do caring. You could volunteer in lots of different ways, and I'm not totally against that. I'm not totally against volunteering as an idea.
No, I'm sorry to cut you in, Peter. That's not what I meant.
Okay.
Basically. You put people into conscription, and there's a halfway house. They get trained in some kind of industry of one thing or another, technical, get some technical ability, or whatever it takes, and they do conscription. That means we would have a reservist fighting force going on permanently, and we would be training up the nation. We could have apprenticeships going on in the time that they're in conscription. Yep. So by the time they come out, we've got people who know how to get into a company and behave like a decent employee. Because at the moment, employers are absolutely having to do everything. Mm-hmm. They're practically nannies to the youth. Going in.
Okay, Peter, thanks for your thoughts. I really appreciate them. That's Peter in Dorset there. Apologies for jumping in thinking I knew what he was talking about, but of course I didn't. So perhaps I should listen a bit more than I talk sometimes. Dave is in London and has been in touch. 0344 499 1000. Dave, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the trans thing, but just on your last guest, Peter, as long as he's the first guy that gets conscripted, I don't care how old he is, he goes first.
Yeah,
I would. And anyone in your studio that wants the same thing, you go first, mate.
It would be a complete waste of time to conscript me. I would be an absolutely dreadful soldier.
Yeah, well,
Dave, and I admire those who have done it and are doing it.
Yeah. You'd be fine, Peter. You'd be sorted out and fit in 10 weeks, mate. So you'd be good.
or be dead. But anyway, through exhaustion. Dave, sorry, what point would you like to make on the trans and Palestinian supporters?
I think it's pretty obvious, right? I think the T was attached to LGB by Stonewall in order to try and conscript the LGB community to support the T community, which they did quite successfully. There used to be, on the Pride marches, there would be companies coming out with their staff saying, no LGB without the T sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now what they're trying to do is think, okay, if we attach ourselves to the Palestinian cause more strongly, maybe that will get the Labour politicians to worry about their Muslim vote. But when you're looking around the crowd, I didn't see a lot of hardcore Palestinian type protests.
I wonder as well, because I think, look, I mean, I think that all those points make sense. And also, Dave, Hamas are not an organisation that want trans people anywhere near them. In fact, they want to kill them. And I just wonder what sort of Palestinian state these people actually want. Do they want a liberal democracy that goes against the beliefs of many, many people in that? In the Palestinian territories that presumably would not be pro-trans. There's certainly no evidence to suggest they would be. I mean, conflating the two together does seem to me bizarre.
Yeah, and also it's not even so much. I know you've made the case about, well, here's what happens in Gaza. Even if you just forget that, if you just got 500 sort of from the Muslim community just leading their normal lives in Great Britain and said, do you mind coming out on a trans activist march, I think you'll find that less than one of them will put their hand up to join in, because that's not what they see as values anyway. So it's
there are some Muslims, I'm sure, who are pro trans rights, but I think you're absolutely right to say the majority are not. Just as the majority of Christians, I would imagine, who profess to go to Easter services today would not say they're necessarily pro trans rights, I would imagine. Dave, thanks for your thoughts. Really appreciate those. Penny's been in touch and says, I agree with one of your guests regarding conscription. All the stabbings we have now, let them go and fight the enemy. It would stop all this snowflake and woke generation nonsense and instill discipline. My husband was in the forces and he said riff-raff went in and were shaped into men when they came out. It shocked the life out of them initially, but the discipline instilled turns them into men, says Penny in Essex. Presumably turns them into women as well, and strong women in the military as well. Sue says, how you're born is fixed for life. Everything after that is a choice you make. Other people's choices don't override the basic fact of life. It's up to you to manage your own life choices, not impose them on others, says Sue. We're going to talk about the travel in just a second, but just some breaking news first of all, in that Zelensky has said either Putin doesn't control his army or the Easter truce is a PR exercise. So we've got a little bit of an updated line on that, and Vladimir Zelensky has shared an update on the Russian attacks hitting Ukraine during Putin's proposed Easter ceasefire. He says there's been an increase in the number of Russian shelling and the use of kamikaze drones since 10 o'clock this morning. Either Putin does not fully control his army, Zelensky says, or the situation proves that they in Russia do not have the goal of a real movement until the end of the war, and they only need profitable PR in the media. That is Zelensky's opinion. Very interesting one. Let me know what you think about all of this, including the trans debate. 0344 499 1000. We'll have a travel update for you from Simon Calder, the doyen of travel journalists in this country, in just a second here on Talk.
I was looking earlier about this new hub for counter-terrorism, which was built in 2021, and this is what police chiefs said about creating it. And they said, counter-terrorism threats are multiplying and the style of attack is changing. Organised crime grows more complex and demands new responses. There is an ongoing urgency to create this hub. Doing nothing is not an option. Doing nothing is not an option, but doing an Easter egg hunt is apparently an option.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Simon Calder, I think, is still on his boat. Simon, you still on the boat?
All at sea, yes, Peter. It's absolutely beautiful here in the Adriatic. I did get the message about the pink shirt, though, so
excellent. Glad to hear it. Yeah,
that's all good.
The dress code is very important, Simon. Simon is, of course, travel expert and travel correspondent for The Independent. What's going on? Go through them all. Tell us what's happening in the UK, especially if people are maybe trying to get home over the Easter weekend.
Well, exactly right. Let's start on the trains, Peter, because that is where you are seeing the biggest problems. Now, there's things we knew would be happening. So that means the Avanti West Coast main hub at London Euston completely closed today and indeed tomorrow for engineering works. That means that getting to and from the West Midlands, North West England, North Wales, southern Scotland is going to be trickier than normal. You're going to have to try and get to and from Milton Keynes on a rail replacement bus to Bedford. And then if you do manage to get as far north as Carlisle and you're heading into Scotland, your problems are only just beginning there, because you will also find that there's rail replacement buses going from Carlisle towards Lockerbie and towards Edinburgh due to other engineering works. And the Greater Anglia Line, this is now an Easter tradition, Peter, as much as Easter eggs, that the main line from Norwich and Ipswich to London Liverpool Street is going to be closed somewhere, and that's happening between Shenfield, I believe, and Brentwood today, which has the effect of meaning there's a rail replacement bus there. But anybody who's travelled on that line over a bank holiday will be expecting that anyway. What we didn't know about was a couple of things which are really serious for tens of thousands of people. First one is a real shortage of drivers on cross country. That is the company that takes you mostly through Birmingham, but all the way from Aberdeen to Plymouth, and from, for instance, Nottingham down to Cardiff. They have a massive shortage of drivers. As a result, at least 50 trains have been either cancelled or curtailed due to staff shortage. And look, you and I have talked many times about the state of the railways and what needs to be done. And you would have heard from politicians, oh, yeah, we've got to sort this out. Because it is still the case that even though we are very clearly a 24/7 society, many railway workers do not have Sunday in their working week. And if they'd rather spend the time with their families, well, what's wrong with that? You know, that's what the deal they've negotiated. So, unfortunately, that's going to be affecting a lot of people. And we've also got a bridge at Cardiff Central, which has needs urgent replacements. So that's causing yet more problems.
Yes, indeed, Simon, that's absolutely true. And I just wonder you talk about the railways extensively there. What about the ferries? What about the airports? Tell us a bit more about the roads as well.
Okay, fine. Let's start on the ferries. We have got problems in Caledonia, McBrain's wonderful network in Western Scotland. Some bad weather there. Slightly less good than it is here, slowing things down or leading to cancellations. But it's coming across the Channel, which is going to be really interesting. No problems going through Dover, but that's what you would expect, because most of the Dover Calais traffic to France is originating in Britain, so it's now people coming back, and we are expecting to see queues building up later in the day. Basically, British motorists are converging on Calais from right across continental Europe. They're all going to turn up at sort of lunchtime, and they're all wanting to get through, first of all, the French border controls, then the UK border controls, having their passports stamped to get out of France, and then at the UK one, having to be checked for any dairy or meat products because of the sudden introduction of a ban there.
Yes.
So I think things are going to be slow there for the rest of the day. If you do make it to the UK, then on the roads, well, busy old day, but not actually as busy as it's going to be tomorrow when you've got, for instance, loads of people finishing their holidays and a pretty full programme of football in the Championship and Leagues 1 and 2. And at the airports, right, you and I have talked before about the problems with air traffic control across Europe. That led to some delays last night. There were some flights coming in an hour or two late from various places in southern Europe. A few problems this morning, not too bad. It's actually when you get to passport control in the UK that you could get the biggest problems because, it's the busiest day, for instance, at the Glasgow and Edinburgh airports for people coming back into the UK, and you could be waiting in line for quite some time. And as you can tell, if you're watching, a shadow has just passed across the face of the...
that's not a horrendous metaphor for the travel, the journeys of many people. Simon, thank you for that update. I really appreciate that. That's Simon Calder there, the travel expert and travel correspondent for The Independent. Thank you to Stuart, who says the trans protesters supporting Hamas in London means there is more support outside Gaza for Hamas than inside Gaza. Well, we don't know they're supporting Hamas necessarily, but they're certainly turning the Palestinian cause. But yes, Stuart, fair point. John in Wallington says it is of strategic importance for the US to get at least a ceasefire in Ukraine, as they want to concentrate their focus on the threat from China in the Indo-Pacific. That is the reason for Trump's growing impatience, says John in Wallington. After the break, we're going to talk to Gary Maund, chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. Quite a few issues, including an absolutely horrendous anti-Semitism just outside London. We'll talk to Gary about that, and also what an Israeli minister has said, that Britain needs Israel, the Israeli minister argues, to defeat Islamist terror. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll take more calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. In fact, let's do a couple of voice notes now. Let's hear from Judith about the protesters.
So I'll carry on walking Sadie now. Hi Peter, Judith here again. Not only am I going to crowdfund the trans rights people to go to Gaza via Tel Aviv, because that's the only way they're going to get there, and also I'm happy to send some of the gays to Gaza as well. I think there's a few of those. A lot of us will get together and we're more than happy to buy, let's say, about 100 tickets, one way only, for these people to go there. As I said, they will only need one-way tickets. I mean, I'm just laughing so much. Well, you've got to laugh, haven't you, Peter? It's just beyond ludicrous. Thanks, Peter. Great show. I'll carry on walking Sadie now. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Judith. You're right. It's absurd. Queers for Palestine. I mean, they may well support the Palestinian cause. They have every right to do so if they want to. Will any Palestinian or will many Palestinians support gay people? I'm not sure. I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that Palestinian people want gay rights in their country. We've looked at some of the statistics earlier in this show, and let's talk to Gary Maund a little bit about it now. Gary Maund is chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. Gary, when you see these protesters, these trans rights protesters, saying that the Palestinian cause and the trans cause is the same, what is your reaction?
It's hard to think of a more ludicrous comparison. Islam is very much against any form of sexual deviancy. The LGBTQ organisation would be absolutely crushed by Islamists. Indeed, we would have situations where they would all be killed, frankly, because being gay or being a lesbian or being trans is totally at odds with Islam. And of course, those who are Islamists, which is particularly Hamas and many of the other groups in Islamic countries, would not tolerate this whatsoever. It's essentially exactly like Turkey's voting for an early Christmas.
Gary, very interesting thoughts there, and I agree with all of that. Also, here in the UK, in Westcliff-on-Sea, near Southend in Essex, Jewish groups have condemned a hateful pro-Palestinian march during Passover last week. Critics say the timing of the protest in Essex against the Israel-Hamas war was despicable. I wonder what your impression of that is.
Well, I agree completely. Indeed, all of these hateful marches, which are essentially anti-Semitic as well as being anti-Israel, should be stopped. What is fundamental to them is not being pro-Palestine, it's being anti-Jew. If they were pro-Palestine, there would have been many, many demonstrations over the years concerning the mistreatment of Palestinians, indeed the mass murder of Palestinians in Lebanon and Syria and other places. No, it's only because Jews are involved. That is why there is support for Palestine. Palestine is being used, the cause of Palestine is being used as a stick to beat Jews with.
Gary, there's another story I want to take your temperature on in the Sunday Telegraph today. This is Israel's Foreign Minister, Gideon Sa'ar, has said that it is clearly in the interest of the UK for his country, for Israel, to prevail in its fights against radical Islamists. He says the result of the conflict in the Middle East, including the war in Gaza, would influence Muslim communities in Europe. He's raised questions over the extent to which the Muslim Brotherhood is able to operate in the UK, pointing out that its activities are disallowed in some Arab states. He said Israel is on the front line of fighting the fight against jihadism, which is a common threat to all of Western civilization, including the UK. Do you agree with him?
Yes, I do. I also think one should look at it in a broader picture. It's really a worldwide matter. The fight against fundamentalist Islam is a cause for concern for every country. And it's very interesting to see how different countries treat radical Islam. How does Russia treat it? How does China treat it? How do the moderate Arab countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates treat it? Indeed, I would argue that it is Western Europe, and the UK in particular, that is the weakest of all countries in the world in being prepared to stand up to radical Islam and take legislation, put it in place to stop it. You see far less tolerance of this ideal in many other countries than you do in the UK.
Gary, thanks for your thoughts this morning. That's Gary Mond there, who's chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. Let's go to Susan in Cambridge, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Susan, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, hi, Peter. Hi.
Hi there.
I just wanted to say I went into a restaurant in Cambridge, and when I went to the toilet, there were two men in there dressed as women.
Okay.
Large men, very tall, very imposing. They had been to the toilet, and there were two single toilets with the seat up. So they'd obviously used the toilet.
Yep.
I felt really, really uncomfortable, and they were doing their makeup and things. But I just feel it's so unfair that women don't feel safe. I don't ever feel safe now going into a ladies' toilet, because I just don't know if it's going to happen again. And the question I'd like to ask is, if a young boy went into a gents' toilet and there was a woman in there on a urinal, sitting on a urinal, would that be okay?
Well, it's also, and it's not just you as an adult female, but also young girls who will go into those, and there will be people. I'm not saying for a second that trans people, are have any predilection for paedophilia or anything like that, but it is a very clear problem. And those two men, as you say, it didn't seem to me, from what you're telling me, Susan, and maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem they were acting in any threatening way towards you. It was simply their presence you found a threat.
absolutely. And there was no reason why they couldn't use the gents' toilet, really.
Yeah.
They were doing it, I think, just to make a bit of a statement. And I did feel very uncomfortable. And if a girl of 12 had gone in there on her own, you know, it could have really affected her, you know, in a long-lasting way. And you know, ladies dress as men, and they don't seem to have this problem with going into men's toilets.
Did you do anything about it? Did you speak to the restaurant management, or did you feel you could even do that?
I did, and he said, "Oh, do you want me to go?" And I said, "No, I don't want to make a fuss, because what can he do? What can he do really? I mean, now the law has changed, but at the time people were freer. But things must not change, really. We have to be safe. Women must be safe, and girls and boys, really.
Certainly.
But anyway, thank you for listening.
Well, thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. Thanks for giving me a ring, and happy Easter to you. That's Susan in Cambridge there. Mike's in Lancashire and has some thoughts on the trans issue as well. Mike, you're very welcome to the programme. Happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter, Peter. Nice to talk to you again. I've not talked to you for a while.
Well, great to have you back on. What would you like to say, Mike?
What it is, Peter, about this trans issue, you know, all these marches and stuff. I moved to Soho when I was about 20, many years ago, when Soho was the place to be. You know, it was a gay sort of paradise. And
It wouldn't have been dull for you, Mike, I would imagine?
Soho?
It wouldn't have been dull?
It was not. It was brilliant, Peter.
Okay.
I had so many trans friends and, you know, people who just wanted to be themselves, who didn't want to be targeted, didn't want to be labelled. I didn't want to be labelled as a gay man and stuff. We all got on with it peacefully. We had our rights and stuff, and we all got on. So I don't really understand. I mean, I worked as well, Peter, for an international film star. I mean, he's dead now. I work for Peter O'Toole.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I met so many people in there who were, you know, some gay, some not gay, but you know what the film star community's like and everything. And it was all. I just don't understand why they want to go thundering through the streets asking for the rights. I mean, what rights?
I don't know. I mean, I wonder if gay people feel, or if trans people feel, you know, what rights do they feel they don't have? That's my question. What do you want to do that you can't already do?
Well, that's what I mean, Peter. You know, we've got gay rights, and I mean, I did fight for gay rights in the 70s, 80s, and so.
But you won. Them. You won. You got them.
Yeah. And we had our rainbow flag. But I mean, even the rainbow flag now has been hijacked for every little sort of, you know.
Yeah. Have you spoken to your trans friends about what's happened in the last few days, Mike?
Say again, Peter, sorry.
Have you spoken to your trans friends about what's happened in the last few days? What do they think?
They all agree with me. You know, they just want to peacefully get on with their lives. They don't want to go rampaging through, I want this, I want that, I want the other. They want to live their lives as they want to live their lives, peacefully and alone, not be targeted, not be, you know, you are so-and-so, you are so-and-so. You know, it's like myself, Peter, all my life as a gay man. I didn't want to be targeted.
Yeah. Just, I mean, there's that wonderful fridge magnet that I saw in a gay couple's flat in New York that I was in at one stage as a student journalist, and it said, gay marriage, because gay people want to be as miserable as everyone else.
It's ridiculous, isn't it? It's just ridiculous. I mean, even Peter, I mean, I'm a gay man. I don't believe in gay marriage.
Wow.
Sorry.
Why not?
Because I'm Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So a marriage between a man and a woman, you know, okay, be with your partner, but not marriage.
What about the seventh commandment, Mike? Thou shalt not commit adultery. What do you think of that one?
It's quite true. I mean, I had two relationships in my life. My first one was 15 years. My second one was 12 years. And now I've been on my own since 2006.
Okay.
You know.
All right, well, you never know, Mike. Love might be around the corner, but thank you so much for your thoughts. Appreciate that. That's Mike in Lancashire there. Appreciate that. Let's hear a couple more voice notes. Ian, first of all. Is what Ian has
Peter, lots to talk about this morning. Just want to put a slightly different angle on it. All of those protesters yesterday, a lot of middle-aged men in dresses. Now, I'm a middle-aged man. and you get a certain problem at a certain age, and it's your prostate. And those guys will all have prostates, and they'll need to go to the toilet a lot. I'm just hoping the local council put on lots of non-binary temporary toilets for them. Otherwise, that'd be infringing on their rights, wouldn't it?
That's one thing I hadn't thought of, Ian. I will be brutally honest with you. Nick has sent us a voice note as well.
Morning, Peter. It's Nick Moore from Loughborough. If the truth be known, every member of the current cabinet will be seething at the ruling by the Supreme Court, because it's one area from which they can no longer stoke the division that they need to survive as a government. They will be furious. Happy Easter, Peter.
Thank you, Nick, and happy Easter to you. Final one before the break from Ian. This is in regard to the comments on Ukraine that Phil and Paul made a little bit earlier on.
Hi, Peter. It's Ian from East Grinstead. Listening to your two political analysts or commentators, whatever you want to call them, talking about Ukraine, I think the majority of people in the country now want our borders defended as opposed to anyone else's borders defended. And as for the Labour guy to say that they're rearming, they're not rearming at a fast enough rate. The Tories, let's be fair, since Cameron onwards, have destroyed the armed forces. The two parties are actually complicit in making us not able to defend ourselves and leaving us with the poorest borders. It's an absolute disgrace, and whereas I agree we should support Ukraine, we need to protect ourselves first.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Thanks to everybody sending a voice note. You can do the same thing, 0344 499 1000. We'll play as many of them as we can. We'll get to as many calls as we can, certainly between now and 1 o'clock. The show is motoring on. It's hard to believe it's more than half over. I'm really enjoying this weekend's programmes. Have been very, very feisty. Even though it's Easter, you can still make your voice heard, of course. No need to take your phone away from your arms. Feel free to send us a voice note. Feel free to give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp text message. That's what Phil has done, and says men should never go into a female toilet, as if a strict Muslim woman needed to use one, how would she feel if she came face to face with a man in a dress when she is not allowed to be in the company of a man without her husband? And Sue in sunny Lytham is a great place. Sue, it has a lovely supermarket called Booth's there, and I actually know Mr. Booth, believe it or not. The son of Mr. Booth is a friend of mine. Sadly, he hasn't given me any of his money. But Sue in sunny Lytham, which is also where my lovely nephew lives, says, Peter, why is nobody asking what is a biological man? Love my Sunday mornings with you, Peter. Well, Sue, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm delighted to know that someone in Lytham St Anne's is listening, because it's a beautiful part of the world there in Lancashire. I've been there a number of times. Right then, we're going to talk about mental health awareness with lorry drivers. I know, especially back in the day when I used to cover a little bit for James Max early in the morning, first with early breakfast between 5 and half 6 in the morning when that show was on. There were quite a few people from the HGV drivers who listened, who called in, who sent voice notes, and I know that there are families of HGV drivers. Lorry drivers are people we don't often think of if we don't know them. I had a relative who's a lorry driver at one stage, in fact I have a couple of relatives who are indeed lorry drivers at the moment, and their mental health is something that I hadn't really thought about before, to be honest. But Breaker is a charity. It was started to raise awareness of mental ill health of drivers in the haulage industry. It now funds and supports counselling for anyone in the industry. It's a really interesting topic. It's one I hadn't thought of before, and we're going to talk to Paul James next about that, so stay with us.
German capacity for refugees is exhausted. We've taken in millions of people from Syria, Afghanistan and Ukraine. So we often think that the illegal migration problem is our problem. It's not. But this also then begs the question about if they're seeking asylum, as they will, because geographically you will go to Greece, say. You then move to Germany. You don't like Germany. The reason they come here is because we give them 5-star hotels and then we hotel them and we give them food and all the rest of it. Why would you go anywhere else?
Exactly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, this is an interesting one. Paul James is sorry, am I on air? I think. Can you hear me? Yes, sorry, I think there's a slight audio problem there. Apologies. Paul James is from the Breaker charity, and he's volunteer with them. Paul, this is a really interesting one because I know there's a fundraiser going on at the moment for Breaker. Just tell us a little bit about what it actually is and what it does and what you do with lorry drivers, a group that a lot of people don't think a lot about, but I know a load of viewers and listeners of our programme are either lorry drivers themselves or people who have them in their family, as I do myself.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Thanks for having us on this morning. Breaker was set up by our founder, Leanne Lyons, following the loss of her husband to his mental health. He was a lorry driver and a mechanic in the industry. And Leanne, with David suffering for so many years, Leanne was aware of mental health issues in the haulage industry. And so initially she started a truck show in 2019 to just try and raise awareness, well, I say globally, but certainly initially within Northern Ireland, to the prevalence of mental illness in the industry. Year on year, the truck show grew, and then about 2 years ago, we were granted charity status, which has enabled us through a contract with which we call Breaker Assist, with Inspire, which is a counselling and advice service.
Okay.
And we are now able to offer a 24-hour helpline, some online information, and if it's really felt people need more in-depth one-to-one, then we are able to fund that counselling as well.
When we think
totally free to the service user.
Okay. When we think of lorry drivers, I hope I'm being reasonable. I'm not sort of stereotyping here. We generally think of men. We generally think of quite the sort of strong, silent type who goes around in the lorry right across the country, right across Europe and other places, delivering those essential supplies, long days, long nights, a lonely life. Presumably that, or can be a lonely life. Does that play into their mental health issues that you're dealing with, Paul?
I really think it does, because when my dad was a lorry driver in the old days, lorry drivers often had a second man because everything was loaded by hand and offloaded by hand. And now I think with containerism and palleting, etc., drivers are mostly on their own. And as you say, it's not just locally, it's internationally, for days and nights with no one to talk to. And maybe we do forget because it's that strong man image. They maybe have their mental health, they have their issues going on at home, like we all do, financially, relationships, and also the pressures of the job, because it's not an easy job, especially when you are tied to deadlines, which you worry about missing, which might affect your income, bonuses, that kind of thing. So the lorry drivers are on their own. I'd like to say very quickly, initially this was set up as a mental health service for men. Quickly realised that there's not only men that drive lorries.
Of course.
And so, but now with charity status, we've also opened it up to everyone in the industry.
Okay.
So we will also offer that service to the people in the yard and the girls and boys in the office.
I know you obviously will, like any counsellor, deal with confidential issues and things that are obviously you'll never reveal, Paul, I'm sure. But just tell us, give us maybe an example or two of the kind of conversations you've had, presumably with lorry drivers who are even in their cab on their journey.
Well, I must say initially, first of all, that we in Breaker Breaker are not counsellors ourselves.
Okay.
Although I do have a qualification, but we don't offer this service ourselves. The service is offered through, as I say, Inspire.
Okay.
I would say as well, which we must get the message across. When it is a self-referral service. When you refer, you need to say that you are referring yourself via Breaker Breaker.
Yeah.
Which then does get all your needs at no cost to you. Breaker Breaker is like the code word, if you like.
Sure, of course.
But we've had a lady this morning, and Leanne, who's the founder, phoned me earlier. We've been trying to get spread our word across the whole of Ireland and the UK now. We will fund anybody in that area. We've had a phone call this morning for a lady down the south of Ireland in great distress, worried about a family member in the industry and not knowing where to turn to or what to do.
Yeah.
And we've been able to give her the information for that family member to refer themselves. But a lot is about finance in terms of what we know about. Everything, as you say, from Inspire is confidential.
Yeah.
We don't know who contacts Inspire at all. We all we do is pay for the service.
Okay.
They tell us the numbers, and we know it. In last year, there was a 225% increase in people in the haulage industry contacting Inspire through Breaker Breaker.
Gosh, that's fascinating. Well, Paul, thank you, and keep up the good work. That's Paul James there from the Breaker Breaker charity. He's a volunteer and they refer people for counselling. Paul is giving me a ring from Southampton. Paul, I understand you're a lorry driver yourself, is that correct?
I am, yeah, that's it. I'm semi-retired now, luckily.
Okay.
But I think a lot of the problem with the HGV industry is the fact that we have been, from somewhere, we have accrued a 48-hour working week average.
It's very long.
It is, and all of a sudden, we used to have, you were obligated to take a 45-hour break at the end of the week. But now, thanks to the EU and other sort of people in the industry, that's been broken up. So you have one day here, one day there, and you've got to make it up on the third week of the month and all that rubbish. People are not getting breaks, and the wages are just not, they're just not good enough, and that's why a lot of drivers, I think there is an abuse of a thing called POA.
What's POA? What's that?
It's point of availability. It's on our working time directive, and it can be used as a break, and there's terms and conditions on that. But I've got a Class 2, so I don't do a lot of long distance driving, but I've spoken to a lot of Arctic drivers, and they use that POA to sort of squirm as many hours as they can to get paid for not driving. And it all puts the pressure on the driver himself, where he just say, like now, if I'm late somewhere, I'll just say, well, if I'm late, I'm late. There's nothing I can do about it. But a lot of people, they do get stressed and het up.
And what about you yourself, Paul? Have you been in the cab? Is it a lonely life?
No. Well, I mean, I sort of turn my music up. I've got my earbuds in. I've got my favourite music. If I want to talk to somebody, I can just phone somebody, because I'll say the in-cab communications and entertainment are quite good.
Yeah.
But luckily, I don't do, like I say, I mean, I might drive 3 hours, 3.5 hours maximum in one stint, so it's not that bad. But, like I say, I listen to music all the time anyway, so, but, I mean, it's the hours that we do, the low pay. I mean, our wages since when when all of a sudden we had a lot of European drivers over here, has not recovered that much. it's grown a bit, but you know, I mean.
Are you surprised that there's a charity now specifically for the mental health of lorry drivers, or do you presumably you welcome that?
Am I surprised? No. I think, you know, everything, you know, mental health seems to be everybody's problem these days. It's never really, I've never really sort of looked at it from a mental health issue. You know, I don't know if people feel that they need someone to talk to and such like that, then that's fine. It doesn't. I'm not a great believer in mental health because it's like back pain of the old years. It's always been an excuse in some level or not. But
I think I agree with you, Paul, in that I think some people use it as an excuse, and I think as an excuse it is definitely used by some people and used as a way of sometimes getting out of things. But I mean, I'm someone myself who has had mental health issues. I've been under the care of a psychiatrist for about 15 years, and I take pills every single day for it. It's a thing. It exists. But I think, you know, also, I mean, I've got a medical need, but a lot of people don't. A lot of people, I think, just need to, you know, it's a good idea to have a chat. And sometimes people are quite solitary, and sometimes people do embrace that necessarily. But more provision, I think, is a good thing. If that helps a few people, well, that's okay. The problem is when it's abused slightly, or people say, you know, I'm a bit upset, or I'm a bit anxious about, you know, an exam coming up or something. Well, that's a perfectly natural sort of human state to be in, I would argue. Yeah, absolutely, and that's why, like I say, I've got mates. You know, the phones in the cabs these days are excellent. And well, that's perhaps their way of just, you know, keeping in touch with people and keeping their spirits up, which is perfectly fine. Yeah, if something happens, you ring your mates up. You know, you've got mates in the industry or doing whatever. Well, that's looking after your mental health too, just in a slightly different way. Paul, thanks for your thoughts there. Really appreciate that. That's Paul in Southampton there, who is a lorry driver himself. John in London has given me a ring about Ukraine. John, we're coming up to the news, but what's your point? What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Good morning. How are you? Good morning.
Very well, thank you.
Just something that got my goat a little bit yesterday. I was looking through the football results on the BBC, and I was flicking through, and I saw a football match in the Ukrainian Premier League. And I looked and thought, are they playing football while there's a war going on?
Well, there are parts of Ukraine that are obviously heavily being shelled by the Russians, so there's about a fifth of it that is in serious trouble. But a lot of Ukraine is absolutely fine to live in, and many people are living a perfectly peaceful life there. We seem to forget that a lot, don't we, John?
No, I know that, Peter. I mean, I know it needs defending, and we were sending billions of pounds of our money to go over there.
$3 billion a year.
Some point, they may need a peacekeeping force with our troops to risk our lives. But I just found it a bit galling that they're not taking it too seriously. There's people at the football match. There's 4,000 people, and there's people playing football. They shouldn't be defending their country, or am I just being a bit hard on them?
No, I think it's a reasonable point, John, especially when you're potentially asking people from the UK to go over there to defend Ukraine. It's a perfectly reasonable point. Yvonne in Solihull says, Peter, stop sounding so reasonable. And so your caller, all one must do in situations like toilets is put your best headmaster voice on and scream at them to get out. I've done it myself very successfully, and the ladies, do not be afraid to do so, says Yvonne in Solihull. We will continue the trans debate after the break. We're also going to talk about dangerous dogs. We're going to talk about Pothole Britain, and the trans debate. We're going to talk to Debbie Hayton, the transgender campaigner and journalist, and also the welfare of the Easter Bunny. Believe it or not, that is not a joke. It is about rabbits and their welfare. You know me, I love animal welfare issues, and there are some serious issues in regard to rabbit welfare. We're going to talk about all of that and get your calls on the air as much as we can before 1 o'clock here on Talk. Stay with us.
You said you don't like Polish people and you don't trust them.
That's not what I said.
Yes, that's what you said.
No.
You must have misheard me. I like Polish people a lot.
Christ me, I never heard of this from you. I've heard this on the radio.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You want to have a listen? Have a listen to what I said. Okay. Listen to this.
Yes.
I don't like Poles. I wasn't talking about Polish people.
Yes.
I was talking about polls. You know, when you do a poll to find out what people think. You know, like they say, 55% of people vote Remain, 45% vote Leave. That's a poll. I wasn't talking about...
but later on you said you don't trust them, so you don't...
I don't trust them. No, that's true. I don't trust polls, and I don't like polls because I don't trust them. But that's not Polish people.
No, that's what I thought. That's what I pick up.
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. Listen, well, I would never say anything like that.
No, so in this case, I never learned English.
No, listen, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. I'm very glad you called in because I wouldn't want you walking around thinking that Mike Graham is a horrible bigot. He doesn't like Polish people.
No, I was thinking, what the hell? What's going on here? Actually, I'm actually back and explain a few things.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you so much for your company. This is Talk. It's just gone midday and it's Easter Sunday. A very happy Easter to you. I don't know about you, but I'm concerned by the story in the front of the Sunday Mirror saying that over 80 dog attacks a day are happening in this country and campaigners are demanding reform as every county is reporting a rise in dog attacks. We'll talk to Niall Barnes, who's the founder of NB Dog Training, in just a second. We'll also talk about Pothole Britain. 2 in 5 drivers that have been hit by potholes. Maybe you are one of them. We pay so much in council tax. So many people's council tax has gone up recently. I know mine went up by 4.9%. People in Scotland, for example, in the Western Isles and in the Shetlands, they've gone up by about 15% plus. We'll talk about the trans ruling as well. Debbie Hayton will join us later on. And because it's Easter Sunday, we'll talk about the welfare of rabbits. Yes, really. Lots of people want to get in on the calls. I'm sure you do too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can also send me a voice note, less than a minute, please, if you would. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 1 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. And just to let you know, tomorrow I will be filling in for Julia Hartley-Brewer, so she is off because it's a bank holiday, and I will be here between 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock tomorrow as well. So that's tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll see you then between 10 and 1. And I'm here, of course, for the next 56 minutes here on this programme. And one story that caught my eye and really worries me is the story, the shock figures on danger pets in the Sunday Mirror today, saying that more than 80 people a day are being savaged by out-of-control dogs. Police statistics are showing that attacks are on the rise in every county. Should there be tougher penalties for reckless owners and dodgy breeders, for example? What about dangerous dogs themselves? Should it be deed, not breed? Attacks are surging since the pandemic pup boom, and victims of charities, as I say, are talking about more about tougher laws. Breeders of these killing machines should be jailed, says one campaigner. Until it happens, I feel my mother died in vain. This was a woman, the daughter of a woman who was mauled by a dangerous dog. It's an epidemic exacerbated by the mass of irresponsible dog owners buying in the pandemic, says another campaigner. Let's speak to Niall Barnes, who is founder of NB Dog Training. Niall, I know you're a very responsible dog trainer. I know you're someone who tries to make sure the dogs are as safe as possible. What do you make of these figures? Are you surprised by them in any way?
No, I'm not surprised. I think some of it may be down to the fact that the police are tracking it and taking it more seriously. So obviously the stats may be a little padded because they're actually paying a lot more attention since the XL bully ban. But there's more dogs than ever in the UK. It's going up year on year on year and quite rapidly. And that's a massive increase in dogs, but there's not been a massive increase in the amount of dog trainers, the amount of education available, and the amount of support for dog owners. So there's going to be a lot of these problems.
Niall, what is the effect of the XL bully dog ban been? Because are we seeing fewer attacks from them? Or is this working in some way? Or are we perhaps seeing the people who are responsible dog owners, responsible XL bully owners, getting things sorted, complying with the law, and then some people just ignoring it?
I think it's been ineffective. I said it would be when I spoke to you probably over a year ago now. And
yeah, I remember that.
I knew it was going to be something along these lines because we're not addressing the problem. We're just kicking the can down the road onto the next breed, onto different people, the same people owning just different breeds, irresponsible people who don't care about the welfare of their dogs or the public. They'll just find a different dog to do it with. So while the amount of attacks by XLs may have come down because of the amount of restriction, the amount of attacks in general is going up. So it tells me that it's a bigger problem. We never fixed the actual root cause. We just put a plaster on something.
What is the root cause? What is the root cause, do you think?
For me, it's the fact that there's a lot of money in breeding dogs, and the more money there is in it, the more people will do it irresponsibly just to make a quick buck. But also there's a massive, enormous amount of undereducation for people on how to actually care for a dog, understand a dog, train a dog, and keep a dog safe. There's dogs in every park in the UK off lead running around causing riot, and eventually they get into trouble with a dog that they shouldn't have run up to, or they go to a person that's scared of dogs and something bad happens. And it's just lack of education. People just don't know what they don't know.
Should dogs ever be off a lead in a park?
I think the legislation says under control, because if I take my dog into a park, he's fine if he's off the lead because he comes back when I call him and he does as he's told. But then you could have a dog on lead that's heavier than its owner that takes them all over. But I think there should be a lot more places where dogs should be kept on lead, and then some dedicated places where they can be off lead, because at least then people can walk their dogs safely. I work with lots of dog owners who have reactive dogs who don't want dogs coming over to them, and it'd be amazing if there was more places that they could take their dogs knowing that they're kind of safe from dogs just running over.
Tell me more about the breeding aspect of this and the money around it, Niall, because I am someone who, I'm a bit of a fundamentalist on this, I'm a bit of a zealot, and my strong belief is that people should adopt dogs and cats and other animals rather than buying them. I think that if you are going to a breeder even, and there are some responsible breeders, but there are a lot that really aren't, and my mantra is adopt, don't shop. I couldn't ever see myself buying an animal. I don't think people should do it as a matter of course, or I think it should be the norm to adopt animals. Some people disagree with that and they're very, very happy to do so. And if you're one of them, give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. But in terms of breeding itself, just tell us a bit more about that and what you see, especially when people come to you, perhaps with problematic dogs.
Yeah, I think there's so many people out there breeding dogs just to make the money. There's very little sort of consequence for doing it, and people will pay a lot of money for certain breeds that are in fashion. The issue with adopt, don't shop for me is I'm a dog trainer. I'm as educated as anyone out there on how to look after a dog, but I wouldn't be able to go and adopt one from a rescue because I've got kids. And that limits the amount of rescues that will take me seriously and allow me to get a dog. I have other dogs, so I couldn't go and adopt a dog. The rescues, and rightly so, are very strict on who they'll let take a dog because they don't want that dog to come back, and they've got that responsibility of care to that dog. But I couldn't go and adopt a dog. And if I can't, then a lot of people can't, which means they will go shop. And also, if people shop responsibly and go to a proper breeder and they see the parents and they raise that dog properly, they invest in training, they educate themselves, that dog never needs to be adopted again. Mm-hmm. So I think the adopt, don't shop it's a bit of it's a plaster. You're helping that one dog and it's amazing and you absolutely should. But if we breed dogs, and dogs will breed, and people buy them and raise them properly and look after them properly, the amount of dogs that end up in shelters will be very small, and it'll be the ones that really need to, because owners passed away, unforeseeable circumstances happen. But most of them are rehomed because people just bought them without knowing what they were really taking on. So I think we can fix the issue if we educate people better.
And education, clearly a very, very big issue. I know that's what you do every day. But Niall, let me hand you a Happy Easter magic wand, and you can change the law on breeding. What would you do to make to ensure that breeders do so responsibly?
Oh, that'd be amazing. I would put in legislation in the same way that driving a car is a dangerous thing, but we all go and do it every day because we all took at least 10 hours of lessons, if not more, and had to pass a test to prove that we can capably handle this thing that can cause damage. But we can go and get a German Shepherd, a Malinois, a Rottweiler, a dog that has big jaws, big drive, and it can cause real harm, and I can go and get it now. By the end of the day, if I go on Gumtree, I can go and get one and bring it home, and then within a week it could have hurt somebody. So there should be a formal amount of education you have to have done, and the test that you have to pass to prove that you're not going to be an irresponsible dog owner, because that will weed out a lot of the people that are just doing it on a whim.
Okay, really interesting thoughts there from you, Niall. Thank you. Niall Barnes there, who's the founder of NB Dog Training. And this is after the news in the Sunday Mirror newspaper that over 80 dog attacks a day are happening in this country. Big news there, and big news this week as well on the Supreme Court on the trans ruling. Men are men and women are women. It's as simple as that. Sarah is in the Isle of Wight. Sarah, thanks for your call. 0344 499 1000 is the number Sarah called. And I know that you have some views on this, Sarah. What are your thoughts?
Happy Easter, Peter.
Happy Easter,
Good
Sarah.
To talk to you. Yes, I'd like to comment on the dog issue and also the transgender, if that's okay.
Of course, go for it, Sarah.
I'm going to try and be fair and reasonable in my comments, but listening to people that have called in already, firstly, dogs, be interesting to know the data by breed, by demographic, to get to the root cause. But certainly for myself, I've just walked a dog today for a friend, and we were greeted by a dog the size of half a cow.
Yeah.
And the owner proceeded to just let it run at the dog that I was looking after.
Sounds scary, Sarah.
And also the lady that was behind me that was in her 80s, I think, told me she'd had another dog attack her last week.
Goodness me.
And her dog. And the poor lady got effing and blinding at her, the old lady, and she was shaking. And this isn't the first time. And objectively, for me, when I lived in London, I moved out about a year ago. There were repeated issues with people's perceptions of how to be with their dogs in the park.
Yeah.
Often under pressure. Often exercising on a postage stamp type grass area. For me, again, I was looking after another dog under Borrow My Doggy.
Yeah.
And, don't want to cast aspersions here, but the dog I was looking after was a female, and the other owner was the owner of a male. And the gentleman proceeded to stay on his mobile phone and laughed as his dog mounted the female dog that I was looking after.
That is not responsible dog ownership, and that is not responsible care for a dog. You were being totally responsible in both those scenarios, and it's hard to know how to act because you're thinking of yourself, you're thinking of the dog that's there. I'm sure you were thinking in the first scenario of the woman as well behind you who'd been attacked, who no doubt was scared as well. And there's so few people there's so many people who are dog owners who are totally responsible and good people, but there are loads who aren't. And that guy sort of seeing that as a joke, that's not a joke actually, that's quite a serious thing in the second scenario.
Well, this poor old lady, she was shaking, this was the age of my mum, and she actually said last week the dog knocked her over and she banged her head. So I suppose the point is, Peter, and I'm not an expert, but I have worked in a rescue, is at the time, we used to receive the same type of dog, the same kind of societal issues as an influence such as, may I say, drug abuse.
Yeah.
And the dog was hyperactive, alert, left in a one-bedroom flat with no windows open. no exercise, walking in its feces. Sorry to say that.
That is what happens. That is what happens, Sarah.
You know, the same demographic and the same cultural challenges, may I say, and perceptions about what's good dog handling and ownership and what isn't. And you know, that for volunteers and also owners of sanctuaries, charities, is like an ongoing ecosystem of problems. Yeah. So that's the first thing about dogs. And, you know, I walk friends' dogs regularly and weekly get sworn at.
Yeah.
Because I say, please, this isn't my dog. Please, can you just put your dog on a lead?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same types of dogs. And I don't wish to, you know, stereotype here.
No, listen, I know what you mean. I've seen it myself, Sarah, but you will see it more. And you're someone who's coming at this from a really reasonable, caring thing. You're caring perspective. You're caring for your friends' dogs. You're giving them a walk they may not necessarily have had. You're giving them extra exercise. You've worked in a rescue shelter. You know this back to front, Sarah, and you're seeing this time and time and time again.
This has been going on, Peter. I mean, I've lived in London most of my life. And, you know, I had a dog at one point about 15 years ago. Walked the dog, bless him, before I went to work. I'd organised a walker. And unfortunately, somebody that owned a very, very big dog that didn't have a lot of time like all of us would allow it to run at the smaller dogs and the puppies. And, you know, headphones on as well is a common issue, so they're not aware of what's going on. Yeah. And it's kind of, without being, again, rude or judgmental, it's like, I've got a big dog, get out of my way. I'm not listening. I'll keep it off the lead, and it's better for me that my dog terrorizes yours and gets loads of exercise, and then I can go to work. And it's kind of a bit like that. So we used to see, and I was there, lots of dog bites, lots of really, really bad maiming, eyes coming out of animals.
Goodness.
All sorts of things.
Sarah, that's grim, and I just wonder how as a society we fix it, because it's not just about the dogs themselves, it's clearly about their owners and their responsibility as well. Sarah, I could talk to you all day, but I definitely want to get your thoughts on the trans issue as well. What do you think about that?
Again, you know, there are many variables, and I'm not an expert. I know you've got various experts dialing in on the animal issue as well as the sort of the transgender issue. Yeah. I have followed the news about sports participation, but all I would say is, as a gay woman, and I've been gay all my life, I've never really attended any of the marches. I've never really got involved in the political side of my sexuality. I've tried to just, you know, keep my head down, get on with everybody, and not want to be marginalised or compartmentalised. But I will say, in my sort of youth, I have found it quite challenging going out into restaurants, bars, hotels, where there is this kind of blurred boundary between men and women. And certainly friends of mine, I know for sure, have been compromised in relationships whereby they thought they'd met a woman. Right. And then physically have been overpowered in a confined space. Goodness. Where that individual is not what they've said that they are. For me, that is not right.
Well, it's rape. That's what it is, if that's happened.
So I also, you know, just sort of socially kind of just going into restaurants and things. I've taken my parents with me. You know, my mum doesn't necessarily want to be washing her hands next to a 6'5" guy that could overpower her. You know, so it's a very difficult thing. Equally, I can see the other side about safety and, you know, equality and access, but fundamentally, men on the whole are physically stronger than women. So that's my point. And I do empathise. I do feel, you know, I do feel for people that feel they need to have that space. But it's that blurred line, isn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Sarah, so many intelligent points from you. Please give me a ring anytime.
I don't know about that.
Well, no, I do. I deal with this all the time, and I know. So, Sarah, thank you. Happy Easter. That's Sarah.
Enjoy your programme.
Thank you. Really appreciate that, Sarah. Thank you. And that's Sarah in the Isle of Wight there. Really, really interesting call on two topics there. Let us know what you think about what Sarah has said there, 0344 499 1000. Let me just play a voice note from Anna on the dogs issue.
Peter, I think the problem with dogs is similar to the problem with cats. So today I'm dealing with 2 unwanted Maine Coons and a rather nicely bred Siamese type who's clearly been hit by a car and left. It's money. It's not about ownership. It's if we could stop people breeding, please make it illegal, because people like me have to mop the mess up. Stop the breeding. Make it compulsory to neuter your pet. You will stop the biting, because there won't be the animals and the suffering of these poor creatures. I mean, these are all COVID cases I'm dealing with, unwanted COVID pets. Stop the breeding, you'll stop the biting. Thank you.
Anna, really interesting thoughts there, and I agree with an awful lot of what you've said there, and good for you for looking after those animals. You're clearly someone who is helping them, and hopefully that cat will make a full recovery. We're talking about the welfare actually of animals a little bit later this hour as well, about rabbits. That's something we don't talk about very often, but of course it is Easter Sunday, and that's why we're talking about it. So stay tuned for that. We'll also talk about Pothole Britain next, and a bit more on the trans right protest. Debbie Hayton will be joining us before too long. Stay with us.
It's not about transgender, it's about women and girls. And biological women don't want men in their toilets, in their change rooms. I've got a daughter who's in high school. I don't want boys in her changing room. It's not about transgender people. It's about the rights of women and girls. The 2 female judges and 3 male judges, was it, in the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
That took them about 10 minutes. They must have gone back, had a cup of tea and gone, do you know what? We're Supreme
And it was
Court
unanimous.
judges.
It was unanimous, wasn't it?
We're Supreme Court judges, and we're having to tell the nation what a woman is? I mean, come on.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, maybe you are one of the 2 in 5 drivers who've had a run-in with a pothole. This is 61% of people believing the roads they use every day are in a shocking state. The RAC predicting 19 million getaways are clogging up the motorways this weekend, the busiest Easter since 2022. But what about the quality of the roads that we're paying for and driving on? 72% of drivers in the east of England say their roads are falling apart. The southwest and southeast not far behind, 71%. And in the East Midlands, 69% of people think the roads are bad, and more than a third think they are very bad. Keir Starmer has vowed to drive down the cost of motoring with a £1.6 billion pothole blitz. I'm not sure that'll touch the side. Steve Berry is with us. He's a former Top Gear host. Steve, how big is the problem as far as you're concerned? Because it just seems that everybody you talk to says that there is a pothole somewhere near there that just needs to be sorted out by the councils we're giving more and more money to. Council tax bills going up.
Well, Peter, I'm 60 years old. I think we've mentioned this before. And so I grew up in the 70s. And I passed 11 plus and went to the grammar school and so met lads that were a lot posher than me. And they would go with their parents on these newfangled foreign holidays to places like Greece and Spain and Yugoslavia. Remember Yugoslavia?
Barely, but yes.
What's it like abroad? And they'd say two things. You can't drink the water that comes out the tap. So what, you can't drink the water? No, you can't. It makes you ill. And two, the roads.
Yes.
They tell you about the conditions of the roads in southern Europe. And you think, well, I'm glad it's not like that here. Well, we might not have their weather, but we've certainly got their roads now, haven't we?
You're absolutely right. And I remember growing up, before all the European money came into the Republic of Ireland, when we went across the border, you could tell that the roads in Northern Ireland were much better than the roads in the Republic of Ireland. Now I think it's the other way around, actually, because there are so many problems with potholes. I mean, it's such a basic thing, isn't it? It's so straightforward that the majority of journeys in this country are done by car, and the roads need to be in a good state, but they're not. Why do you think this is?
Well, it's money. I mean, sorry, Peter, I strongly suspect that you do that as well. People may not realise that the responsibilities for different roads fall to different bodies. Local roads, the streets that you drive on every day, the ones that people are looking at now, they're the responsibility of the local council.
Yeah.
Motorways and major A roads come down to either Highways England or the appropriate body in the other states, provinces and countries that make up the United Kingdom. So, by the way, I noticed that on the government website, they've had to warn people, you'll like this, they've had to warn people not to park on the motorway and take pictures of potholes that they might have hit.
Wow.
Can you
okay, that's pretty serious.
Tell people not to do that. But I've looked into this because I had an incident a couple of years ago on West Edgerton Street, the second worst road I've ever driven on, West Edgerton Street in Salford. The worst road I've ever driven on is the Spanish road in the Western Sahara. But that road has an excuse. It was heavily mined during a long war between Mauritania and Morocco.
I think that's probably fair enough,
Street.
yeah.
Well, yeah, West Edgerton Street's excuse, I've no idea. But it ripped the suspension. It didn't pop the tyre. It didn't buckle the wheel. It ripped the suspension out of the back of a Jaguar, a substantial Jaguar estate car. This is the point that we've got to. But here's the problem. When you look into how to get recompense for the damage that these potholes do to cars, what you find out is you can't really get the council to pay for an individual pothole. What has to be determined is whether they have an appropriate road repair system or plan in place. For instance, I've noticed on that street in Salford where I live that I've just mentioned, a lad's been out, and I bet it was a fella, has been out with a kind of high-vis pen, and he's drawn a line round all the worst ones. So if you complain about hitting those potholes, a civil servant will ask another civil servant, was there a clear plan and schedule for pothole repair? Oh, yeah. We sent a lad out with a can of high-vis paint and he drew a line around all the bad ones.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
Well,
that's fine. That just solves the problem. I did see, I wonder if you saw this story about someone who managed to draw shall we say, not perhaps a square or a circle, but more of a sort of phallic image around potholes, and that sprung the council into action.
Well, Peter, that happened in my hometown. I am Steve Berry from Berry, just up the road from Salford, literally the adjoining town. And that gentleman who decided to, in the spirit of the original graffiti artists of ancient Rome, who apparently didn't mind a bit of rudity and crudity themselves, he shamed the council into doing something about it. Here's the big problem, though. Whilst it's an issue for car drivers, and I'm not saying it's not, I am both a cyclist and, perhaps more importantly here, a motorcyclist.
Okay.
And what is an expensive problem for car drivers can quite literally be fatal for cyclists and motorcyclists.
Okay.
Manchester City Council spent a huge amount of money trying to persuade people to get out of the car, get onto two wheels, take up less space, use less fuel, greener, cleaner, easier to park, etc., less congestion. One of the byproducts of potholes is that the cycle lanes of Manchester, and if you like, I'll go out with a camera and I'll get it on camera for you, the cycle lanes of Manchester have been rendered unusable. Right. They're so dangerous because all the loose gravel from the potholes is now in the cycle lanes. And because they don't seem to sweep the streets anymore, remember when they used to sweep the streets? Remember that?
Yeah.
Because they don't seem to do that anymore. Because they don't see, it's made cycling in the cycle lanes where you're supposed to do it. They've just become a depository for all the loose gravel that comes out the potholes. They need to do something. And a lot of people now, I think, if people say, oh, why are these sort of SUV vehicles, why are these giant sport utility vehicles so popular? Why do people want to drive around in them?
Well, it's a very good point, Steve.
Yeah, because driving on the main roads of Britain now is like me 20 years ago trying to get to Nouadhibou on the Spanish road in the Western Sahara. That road didn't rip the suspension out of my vehicle, but West Edgerton Street in Salford ripped the suspension out of my Jag, and that cost me £1,000.
And I'm sure a lot of people will have very, very similar stories and will lament that just as you do. Steve, thanks for your thoughts there. Steve Berry, former Top Gear host. If you've had problems with potholes, let me know. 0344 499 1000. After the break, we're going to talk about the trans rights protest again. Debbie Hayton will be with us, a trans campaigner and activist, so stay tuned for that. And let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Barry in Morecambe, who's been in touch with a WhatsApp message. I thought I would let you know what our crazy local council has planned for our street. It's a quiet street, perhaps one car passing every 5 minutes. It was a designated 20-mile-an-hour zone a few years ago. It's one of the last ones to be gritted in icy conditions, so maintenance is rare. In fact, I wonder if there are any fish in the potholes. The council, in their wisdom, have informed us they're going to install speed bumps, but the potholes remain. Crazy, question mark. Barry, yes, is the answer. Why don't they take all the concrete and all the, what's it called? Tarmac, thank you. Life's a bitumen. And put it in the potholes. That would make sense, I would imagine. I imagine you would agree with me, Barry. Penny says, when I had my car serviced, they sent me a video of my wheel with the inside all buckled. I know I went down a pothole some time ago, but I had no idea of the damage. And when I looked and my car drove through without any indication of the damage. A nice cost to pay, though, says Penny in Essex. And Ian in Cheshire says it should be mandatory to have a licence in order to breed cats and dogs. Part of the licence should be irregular visits by vets to check all aspects of the animal's health and the care provided by the breeder, says Ian in Cheshire. We'll be talking about the welfare of the bunnies as it is Easter Sunday. We'll do that a little bit later on. But first of all, I want to talk about the big legal ruling this week. Debbie Hayton is with us. She's a transgender campaigner and journalist. And of course, we know that not only was there this Supreme Court ruling this week, but thousands of trans rights activists gathering in London after that ruling on the definition of a woman, conflating the issue with the Palestinian cause, for example, denigrating statues of Churchill and indeed Millicent Fawcett, the great feminist and suffragist hero. Let's talk to Debbie now. Debbie, thank you for joining me on the show this morning. Are you well?
I'm fine, thank you. Good to talk to you, Peter.
When you saw those protests yesterday, what did you think?
I was disgusted by it, to be honest. These people don't speak for me and for many other trans people up and down the country who just want to get on with our lives in peace. The Supreme Court judgment on Wednesday was sound common sense. At the end of it, trans people, the court judged that women should be treated with dignity and respect, and that trans people should be treated with dignity and respect. But we shouldn't be trying to pretend that trans women are women, because we're not. And after that ruling, hopefully we can now move forwards with confidence, and with everybody's rights being protected and everybody feeling secure, hopefully we can move beyond the fuss and the dreadful situation we've suffered the past 6-7 years.
There have been so many people who have been really badly affected by this. We look at J.K. Rowling's reputation. We look at Mumsnet, for example, that website that said that at one stage government advertising was being pulled because they were seen as bigoted. For example, there are people who've lost jobs over this. There are people who have, Kathleen Stock, for example, writing a letter to the Times this week saying, "I told you so," straightforwardly. Do you think we can move on as a society after this, especially when you see those kind of protests yesterday of people who are just not accepting the rule of law?
Well, I think it will take some time. Clearly, there were people grieving the situation, that they thought they could do exactly as they pleased and demand everything they wanted, and that society would cave into them. I'm not surprised they're upset when they realise they can't do that. But in the long run, hopefully, people will calm down. But I do worry about, some of the scenes that I saw with young people there being terrified, not by a Supreme Court judgment that they've probably never read, but by people chanting at them, telling them that society hates them, telling them their rights have been taken away. It's just not true. We need to, as I said, we need to come back to sound common sense so that everybody's rights are protected.
How do we calm this down? How do we say to people who are really upset by this, who've been terrified, as you say, who've been often told things that aren't true, how do we say, look, this is actually, trans people don't have any fewer rights than they did this time last week. It's just that the definition of a woman, for example, is to do with biological sex.
Well, it will take some time, and politicians and leaders in society need to step up a little bit. What I read about Labour MPs talking to each other, saying that they can subvert this ruling or something like that, I just think is totally irresponsible. It needs people who are in positions of leadership to say, yes, some of us got it wrong, we didn't listen. Now the Supreme Court has judged what a woman actually is. It wasn't news to anybody. We've always known this. So the judgment's there. It needs people in positions of leadership to actually step up and lead.
How important is it for people like you, Debbie, who's a transgender campaigner, you're a journalist yourself, you're someone who has transitioned, and you're someone who is saying that actually let our voice be heard here. It's not just the militant side of this. I know a number of people who are gay, for example, who feel that gay rights activism over the years, for example, has been far too militant and has been not representing the majority of people. Do you feel that the majority of trans people are actually okay with this?
Well, I suspect the majority of trans people, if I'm honest, are probably feeling anxious and scared. The protest yesterday didn't help, but it's the uncertainty moving forwards.
So how do we deal with that? What should the government do? What should the Commission on Human Rights, for example, what should they do just to give guidance and to make sure that everybody knows exactly what the law says and how it's been interpreted?
Well, for example, on Spaces, we've had the discussion over toilets. I don't think it ever started with toilets, but it's finished with toilets. And in that situation there, for too long, companies, businesses have been banging the trans rights drum, but really what they've meant is that women should just budge up and make room, and that's not fair. If businesses really care about trans people, then perhaps they can ensure that their provision also includes people who don't want to share facilities with their own sex. So it's just asking people to step up if they really believe in supporting trans rights.
Debbie, thank you for chatting to me this morning. That's Debbie Hayton there, who's a transgender campaigner and journalist. Appreciate your thoughts. Let's speak to Gemma in Devon. 0344 499 1000 is the number that Gemma has rung. You're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say, Gemma?
Well, hang on. Let me get over my nerves first.
Take your time. It's all good.
To be honest with you, I just want to be able to get on with my life. Yeah, not feel threatened by anybody.
Just to clarify, Gemma, you're a trans person, is that right?
Yes, I am a trans person.
Yep.
I transitioned over 18 years ago, and I went through hell, to be honest with you, bigoted, spat on, beaten up, all sorts, yeah. I do feel afraid of being outside again now. Yeah, it has frightened me, all this, because all I want to do is get on with my lives and everything else. And then as it comes to trans people in sport, I don't think that's not right. We are stronger. We are bigger.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it shouldn't happen.
So what's made you feel scared? What's going on at the moment? There's clearly a furore around it. There's a lot of very upset people, Gemma. And what can the government do, and what can even just people around you do to make you feel safe?
I mean, I have looked at all the paperwork and everything else, and I've been following it since it all started. It's like going into the toilets, yeah? I do use the disabled toilets where I can, yeah, because that, to me, is my own self-preservation, and it doesn't push who I am on other people.
Sure, yeah, okay.
So it kind of, how can I put it? But where I can't use the disabled toilets, I have to use the female toilets, because some of them are, how can I put it, vandalised.
Yeah.
Or there's no way of getting into the disabled toilet to be able to use it. So I have to go into the female toilet. I can't use the male toilet because I haven't got no male genitalia.
Right,
yeah,
okay.
That's gone.
Yeah.
And I'd get ridiculed if I went into a man's toilet, which is fair enough. That's why I use disabled toilets, because it stops all this aggro.
Yes. If you go into a women's toilet, Gemma, do you feel that there are people there who will judge you and will be intimidated by you? Because I've spoken to women today, even on this show, who say they don't want trans women in their toilets.
Right. What I've found over the years is some women don't care. Okay, a majority are fine with it, but then you get the ones that come up, and I'm not saying they're wrong or right. Yeah, that side of it doesn't matter. I understand where they're coming from. Yeah, because they don't know what's inside my trousers or under my skirt. They haven't got a clue. But I'm not afraid to talk to people. If they want to ask me a question, I will ask it. But yeah, I can understand where it comes from. Yeah, feeling safe. I get all that.
Sure.
All I want to do is be able to get on with my life. Yeah, and do what I love doing, and that's just going out and meeting people and enjoying it. Yeah, enjoying the countryside. I don't want all this negativity. Yeah?
Well, it's going to calm down, Gemma, and you've spoken a lot of sense there. And thanks for getting over your nerves and giving us a call. I appreciate that. Very, very interesting to talk to you. And that's Gemma in Devon there. And thank you to Gemma, and happy Easter to you. Vivian is in Devon as well, actually. So let's go southwest to Vivian. You have some thoughts on this, Vivian. Tell us your story.
Oh, yes. I'm getting fed up with hearing people say what toilets trans people should use. They say, oh, just use the disabled toilets, as if people that use them are totally irrelevant.
Do you use a disabled toilet?
Yes, I do.
So presumably you want that to be as free and not have people in it. You need to be able to use it. And often, I don't know about you, Vivian, but I know some disabled people who often, they need to use the facilities quite quickly sometimes.
Yes, I was going to mention that. There's one toilet in there, and so far the ones I've been to are very clean. And I'm concerned that if a lot of people are using them that would rather not be using them, are they going to take as much care?
Yeah. Well, Vivian, I think that's a very valid argument, certainly from people who are disabled, and that is, I'm glad you've made it, because disabled people often aren't heard in this debate, Vivian.
No, it's as if we were an irrelevance.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely not, and I really appreciate you contacting this programme to make that point. That's Vivian there in Devon. We heard from Gemma as well, so thank you to them. We'll talk in just a second. Well, we'll take more calls. There's plenty of time between now and 1 o'clock, and if you want to get your call on the air, 0344 499 1000. But we'll also talk about, we've been talking about animal welfare for dogs and cats. We're going to talk about rabbits next. Yes, really, because the Easter Bunny image is misleading. The UK is facing the worst rabbit rescue crisis, and they're up to 100,000 rabbits in rescue centres. Stay tuned for that, and more of your calls coming up between now and 1 o'clock here on Talk.
We know that the enemies of the world do not like President Trump. He has made it very clear with the tariffs, and we see the tariffs are working. China is now coming to the table. The infamous, large, massive China and their economy is coming to the table. Why? Because the yen dropped 18%. The globalists don't want President Trump in office, but we, the people of the United States of America, the constitutionalists of this great nation, are the ones that have always raised up President Trump and always empowered him to do exactly what he promised he would do. And again, promises made, promises kept.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Sam is disabled and lives in Barnsley and says, so the disabled have to be pushed out? Well, Sam, I certainly hope not. This person says, trans women can use men's toilets and just go in a cubicle. Men need to welcome them. And Leslie says, Peter, I admire Debbie greatly. She should be in Parliament to instill common sense to our Labour politicians. And Leslie also says, my council came out to paint yellow lines around a pothole. 3 months later, they came to fill it in, but in the 3 months in the meantime, another pothole had developed. I asked, are you filling in both holes? The answer is, well, we haven't got a docket for the second hole. I mean, that is classic Jobsworthy and nonsense. Leslie, thank you so much for your thoughts on that. Right then, we've been talking about dogs and cats. We've been talking about dangerous dogs. Someone sent in a very good voice note about cats and breeding. I want to talk about rabbits now, because it is Easter Sunday and we think about the Easter Bunny. But that image, of course, is misleading, because the UK is actually facing the worst rabbit rescue crisis. Up to 100,000 rabbits are in rescues and thousands of people are breeding without licences. There are calls to tighten the laws and the public are urged to learn about this. Well, we're going to learn a little bit about this from Ray Walters, who is the Chief Executive of the Rabbit Welfare Association and Fund. Ray, thanks for joining us. Very happy Easter to you. What's the scale of the crisis here? Because I'm a big animal welfare person. I used to have Cat of the Week on this show. People tell me to bring it back. And rescue cats are a big thing for me. Rescue dogs as well. We think less about rabbits.
We do think less about rabbits, unfortunately, and they do seem to fall through the gaps in terms of legislation. And we really need to raise the status of rabbits so that they're given equal consideration to dogs and cats. There are at least 67,000 rabbits every year going through rescue centres, and they're the lucky ones. They're the ones that get space in a rescue centre where they're going to be neutered, vaccinated, paired up with another rabbit and properly rehomed via a proper home check, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands more either rehomed or sold online, and there are no welfare checks in place there at all.
Are they forgotten when it comes to rescues for many people who would perhaps not even think about adopting a rabbit? And the UK, I know, is having its worst rabbit rescue crisis. Why is it so bad at the moment, especially as we celebrate Easter? We think of rabbits as cute, furry animals, and of course they are, but at the same time they're in great need, aren't they?
They are in great need. We really would encourage people to adopt, don't shop. Do the research and then go along to a rescue adoption centre and adopt, rather than buying from a breeder, which is completely unlicensed, unregulated, or a pet shop, because via a rescue centre, adoption centre, the rabbits will have been health checked, they will have been vaccinated, neutered, they'll be bonded up together, you will get lifetime support. The problem, really, Peter, I think, has been the perfect storm. In terms of rabbits themselves, of course, they're absolutely irresistible. We know that. Who could resist a rabbit? And that's half of the problem, that people acquire them on impulse without doing the research, without thinking it through, planning it through, without realising the big commitment that they are. They're often considered children's pets, but actually they can live for 10 to 12 years. You could be spending anything between £10,000 and £15,000 over their lifetime. And children might have left home, gone off to university, and the adults are still going to be looking after them, and they possibly haven't realised that. We've had COVID, where we saw the number of rabbit breeders treble online. And then we've got a big difference between rabbits and dogs and cats is actually what rabbits are quite famous for, which is how they breed. So they can...
Breeding like rabbits.
Breeding like rabbits, exactly. They can breed from around about 16 weeks. And we know we should keep rabbits in pairs. So you will have gone along to somebody, you will have, perhaps bought 2 rabbits via a breeder. You'll have been told these are 2 boys or these are 2 girls, so they won't breed. They might fight, but that's another issue. Then you discover one morning that you haven't got 2 boys or 2 girls. You've got a male and a female, and you've got a litter of, say, 6 babies. So you've straight away jumped up to 8 babies. You have a quick look, you remove the male, and you realise that you've got a male and a female. You remove the male, but you don't realise that the male's already mated with a female, and you've got another probably 6, 7, 8 bunnies on the way.
Yeah.
So in 60 days, you could go from 2 to 20 rabbits in 60 days.
It just reminds me of that episode of Father Ted, I'm afraid, where there's so many rabbits in Bishop Brennan. How do you? I know there's a change in the law that you want to get through. What would you like to happen?
Yeah, so the relevant legislation is the licensing of activities involving animals that came out in 2018. That's just had its post-implementation review that came out in December, so that legislation is due for review. We would like it to be updated so that the dog breeding legislation, which is already in there, is updated to include rabbits. That would mean people that were breeding, say, over 3, 4, 5 litters of rabbits, they would have to be licensed, inspected. The online classified platforms then would need a license number to include, which would really restrict how many adverts they could place without being licensed and inspected. It would put some sort of safeguards in place.
Okay. Listen, thank you so much, and we wish you well in your work, Ray, because I know you really care, and I'm delighted that you agree with me that we should adopt and not shop. That's Ray Walters there, who is the Chief Executive of the Rabbit Welfare Association and Fund, just thinking about another animal that we should be kind to and think about and adopt in a very mindful way. Claire has been in touch from the Wirral about the dogs issue. Claire, what do you think of this issue? You've been listening earlier on. Very happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter to you, Peter.
Thank you so much. What do you think about the dogs issue, Claire?
Yeah, talking about the dog attacks, we can bring in legislation, like licenses for the breeders, which of course they have licenses already, and licenses for owners. But the problem is that it's the good dog owners and the lawful abiding community that this would affect, and not the non-lawful, non-law abiding community.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is that a lot of these dogs are seen as status symbols.
That's right.
The aggressive ones especially, and they're like a fashion accessory. And these guys, say guys, more so guys than girls.
I think guys is fine, but thugs is probably more accurate.
I think that's right. They want a big hard dog. They want an aggressive dog, and they're the non-law abiding person, so they're not going to worry about buying a license or getting even a dog from a licensed breeder. And the problem with a lot of these dogs that are being bred, they're interbred. Now, I'm not really sure. I'm no expert on DNA analysis and all that. I can't tell whether you could check a dog to see if it's very interbred.
Yeah.
But it's like the old story, you know, of the mad cat woman or the mad dog person. You know, they've got these feral cats. Now, a lot of them, they have so many of these cats, or the dog person has so many dogs that they're almost like a feral
Yeah, it's true. And they're just not being responsible, Claire. You're absolutely right. They're just not being responsible, and that is something that needs to change, certainly. Claire, thank you. That's Claire in the World, and a very happy Easter to you as well. Andrew is in Halifax and wants to talk about potholes. Andrew, you're very welcome to the programme.
Hello, Peter. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter, Andrew.
Well, there's actually the pothole problem, which here in Calderdale, which is where Halifax, the borough of Halifax is in, is some of the worst in the country. But there's an element that's not being talked about, which I am noticing more and more and more. And that's also things like the white markings on roads that disappear and never get repainted.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've seen that, or not seen that, as the case may be. Yeah.
Direction signs that are damaged, maybe have pieces blown out of them in a storm, they're never replaced. It's just everything on the road is just being left to rot. Another one is, the guardrails on the edge of pavements that separate them from the road. If somebody crashes into them and damages them, rather than, it's been a few weeks and they've been replaced, they're just left with gaping holes in them. What the hell is happening to this country?
Well, I just think it's a very, very good point, and we're all paying more and more in tax, and these basic things that are to do with safety, are to do with getting people to where they've got to be, keeping them on the right side of the road, making sure that people know where they're going. I mean, they should be a priority, and it just seems that there is just this decline that's happening, Andrew.
It is, and it's something I was also talking to Ian Collins about not so long since. And it's one of the great mysteries of life to me. It's like, where does the universe end? And that is, I've driven in over 11 countries. And why is it that I can drive in other countries for hundreds and hundreds of miles without coming across roadworks?
Yeah,
here I
very
go
good
about
point.
50 yards and I come across 5 of them.
Well, at least at least they're fixing something. Andrew, I remember driving in America and I had the sat nav on and it said turn left in 126 miles.
yeah. I've driven in America. It's a marvellous experience.
It is. Their roads, if we could emulate those, that would be fantastic. Mark is in Lincolnshire. Mark, we've literally got about a minute and a half left. Happy Easter to you. I know you're a Christian. I know it's a very important time for you, and you've got a little thought on Easter for us.
Hi there. Happy Easter.
Happy
Peter.
Easter.
Great show again. Just indulge me. I just wanted to do a couple of things. Just a very short verse from the Bible, from the Gospel, and just some words I put down myself for anybody that might be having a bit of a hard time, or you're worried politically, or whatever it is. If that's okay, Peter.
Sure. We've got about a minute, so just go ahead, Mark. Far away.
He is not here, but has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day risen. That's Luke 24. And just some words of my own that I put down. As I say, for people, politically, whatever. Basically, very simply, when the darkness seems to surround you and all hope seems lost, turn to the light, for that is the Lord. And through him you will find comfort, strength and courage. For the Lord's grace shall restore your hope and give you your strength. And in the name of Lord Jesus Christ, you shall rise tall amongst men. And there you go.
Wow, that's a very hopeful message for Easter, Mark. Thank you. That is Mark in Lincolnshire there. And Mark actually contacted me before the programme saying he wanted to do that. I know there are many Christians who watch and listen to this programme. I'm agnostic. Mark is a Christian. I know that in Christianity, Easter is so much, it's the #1 festival, even more so than Christmas. And I wish every Christian and anyone who's celebrating Easter, maybe you've just got a nice Easter egg and you think that's a nice thing. I was given one of those this morning, that you think it's such an important thing. So happy Easter to everyone, and thanks to the top team behind the glass